The Grand Master of Demonic Cultivation by Mo Xiang Tong Xiu. An unofficial reading by Emm Wilde. Book 1. Chapter 4. The Elegant Flirt. The Lan Clan residence was located deep within a mountain underneath Guzu City. Within the gardens of waterside pavilions, charmingly dispersed, there were long, endless stretches of black-roofed white walls, shrouded in the mountain's mists year-round. To stay within them was akin to staying amidst the transcendent sea of clouds. Fog permeated the early morning, the first rays obscured in haze, complementing its name, the cloud recesses. The mountain was as tranquil as the people were silent, and the mind was made to be as still as water. The only sound to be heard was the tolling of the bell from the high tower. While this was no Buddhist monastery, it resonated with the vast emptiness that was whispered from the Zen of Hanshan. However, this stately meditative scene was abruptly pierced by a long wail. With this morning's studies and sword practice interrupted thus, it sent a shudder through the clan disciples, both familial and sect alike. In spite of themselves, they looked to the main gate, from whence the sound came. Wei Wuxian was bawling in front of the main gate, clinging to the spotted donkey. Lan Jinyi was reprimanding him. "What are you crying for? You're the one who said that you like Hong Wenjun. Now that we've brought you back, what's with the blubbering?" Wei Wuxian was miserable. Ever since that night on Mount Dafan, he had had no chance at all of re-summoning Wen Ning. No chance to figure out why Wen Ning had lost his mental faculties, nor any chance to find out why he had reappeared in this world, before he had been carried back here by Lan Wangji. When he was younger, he and some disciples from other clans had been sent to the Lan family to study for 3 months, and he had personally experienced the dull dreariness that was the Lan clan of Guzu. He still had lingering fears of the Wall of Discipline, which was densely engraved with over 3,000 rules. Just now, as he was being dragged and hauled up the mountain, he had glanced at the stone wall again in passing. There had been 1,000 more rules engraved since, so it was now over 4,000. 4,000! Lan Jinyi admonished him. "All right, quiet down. Clamor is prohibited in the cloud recesses." It was precisely because he didn't want to enter the cloud recesses that he was making such an awful racket. Once he was dragged in, it would be difficult to get back out. Back when he had attended school here, the visiting students had been given a jade travel token. Only with the token could one come and go freely. Otherwise, the protective barrier surrounding the cloud recesses could not be crossed. Over a decade had passed since then, so security could have only grown tighter, not laxer. Lan Wangji stood silently before the main gate, turning a deaf ear and watching on coolly. When Wei Wuxian's voice quieted a little, he said, "Let him cry. Drag him inside when he's done." Wei Wuxian clung to the little spotted donkey and cried even harder. He knocked his head repeatedly against the creature. What misery! He had thought that after getting whipped by Zidian, he had been cleared of any suspicion. He had been feeling light and airy, and his lips could never pass up the opportunity to tease, so he had spoken offhandedly to disgust Lan Wangji. Who would have thought that Lan Wangji didn't react to such things the way that he used to? What logic was this? Could it be that over the years, despite the heights that he had reached in cultivation, he had only become that much pettier? Wei Wuxian said, "I love men, you know, and your clan is so full of beautiful men, I'm scared I won't be able to control myself." Lan Shizui reasoned with him. "Mo Ganzi, Hong Wenjun brought you here for your own good. Sect leader Zhang wouldn't have stood down unless you came with us. Over the years, countless people have been arrested and taken to Zhang clan's Lotus Pier, and none have ever been freed." That's right, Lan Jingyi said. You've never seen Sect Leader Zheng's methods, have you? Super vicious. He stopped when he remembered the Lan clan rule, do not speak behind another's back, and snuck a peek at Lan Wangji. Only when he saw that Hong Wenjun had no intention of punishing him did he regain the courage to continue his grumblings. It's all that Yiling Patriarch's fault for starting the trend of his evil craft. There are way too many people playing around with that senseless cultivation method of his. The sect leader Zheng is such a paranoid person. Would it even be possible for him to catch them all? Why didn't he take the proper look before suspecting someone like you? Playing the flute like that, That, said more than 1,000 words. Wei Wuxian felt very much like he needed to explain himself. Actually, maybe you guys won't believe me, but, I actually play the flute all right. Before he could finish, several white-clad cultivators stepped out from the grand entrance. They were dressed in the Lan uniform, their simple robes flowing as light and white as snow. The one in the lead was tall and graceful in bearing. At his waist hung a sword, and also a jiao of white jade. When Lan Wangji saw him, he gave a light nod in respect, and the man returned the gesture. He then gazed towards Wei Wuxian and smiled. Wangji never brings guests home, and this is... As this man stood face to face with Lan Wangji, they appeared to be mirror reflections of each other, except for the color of their eyes. Lan Wangji's eyes were exceptionally light, as faint as tinted glass, while the other man's eyes were deeper, gentler in hue. This was the clan leader of the Lan clan of Guzu, Lan Huan. His sobriquet was Zewujun, and his courtesy name was Lan Shichen. People were a product of their environment. The Lan clan of Guzu had always been renowned as a family who constantly produced handsome men, and the twin Jades, born of the head household of this generation, were especially striking. While these two brothers had not been born twins, their looks were very similar, and it was difficult to discern who was the superior in appearance. However, they were one color, two shades. Lan Shichen was warm and elegant, sincerely gentle. Lan Wangji was overly aloof and stern, completely unsociable, and kept others at an arm's length. This is why, in the rankings of looks and character of the clan's young masters, the former was ranked first, and the latter second. Lan Shichen was worthy of the title of sect leader. Even at the sight of Wei Wuxian clinging to a spotted donkey, he didn't appear perturbed in the least. Grinning broadly, Wei Wuxian let go of the donkey and approached. The Lan clan of Guzu placed extreme emphasis on seniority and social rank, so all he had to do was spew some sheer nonsense at Lan Shichen, and he'd surely be beaten out of the cloud recesses. Yet, unexpectedly, just when he was about to demonstrate what he was capable of, Lan Wangji cast him a glance, and Wei Wuxian's upper and bottom lip became inseparable. Lan Wangji turned his head and continued to exchange words with Lan Shichen in full seriousness. Zhang, you again take your leave to visit Lianfengzun? Lan Shichen nodded. To plan the next symposium at the Golden Carp Tower. Wei Wuxian couldn't open his mouth, so he returned to the spotted donkey to stew in bitterness. Lianfengzun, courtesy name Jin Guanyao, was the current clan leader of the Jin clan of Lanling, and the only illegitimate son of Jin Guanshan to ever be recognized. Jin Guanyao was also Jinling's little uncle, being half-brothers with Jinling's father, Jin Zuan. Jin Guanyao was also the elder half-brother, born of a different mother, to Wei Wuxian's current identity, Mo Xiang. They were both illegitimate sons, yet the difference between them was night and day. Mo Xiang slept on the ground and ate leftovers at the Mo Manor, while Jin Guanyao sat upon the highest seat of the cultivation world, with all those below at his beck and call. He could invite Lan Shichen to visit if he wished, or he could plan a symposium if he wished. However, it was no surprise that the two leaders of the Jin and Lan clans shared such a close friendship. After all, they were known to be sworn brothers. Shu Fu has taken what you brought back from Mo Manor for examination, Lan Shichen said. Wei Wuxian's ears perked up at the mention of Mo Manor, but then he felt his lips part. Lan Shichen had removed the silencing spell and turned to Lan Wangji. It is rare to see you bring somebody back home, and also to appear so happy. Treat your guests well. Don't be like this. Happy? Wei Wuxian scrutinized Lan Wangji's face. Where exactly did he see happy? After watching Lan Shichen leave, Lan Wangji instructed, drag him inside. And so Wei Wuxian was forcibly dragged into the place he had sworn never to set foot in again. In the past, those who had come to visit the Lan clan had all been distinguished clan leaders or important figures. They had never received a guest like him, so the juniors jostled as they swarmed him, all finding this both refreshing and fun. If not for the strict clan rules, the trip definitely would have been full of merry laughter. Lan Jingyi said, Heng Wenjun, where do we drag him to? The Tranquility Room, Lan Wangji said. The Tranquility Room? The juniors all looked at each other in dismay, not daring to speak up. Wei Wuxian was left in the dark as to the meaning of their reactions, but the same thought had flashed through all the juniors' minds. But that's the study and bedroom Heng Wenjun had never permitted others to enter. The interior of the Tranquility Room was minimalist, without any superfluous decoration. The folding screen was illustrated with paintings of the rolling, ever-changing clouds, done in the realist style of Gombi, and the Guqin table was placed before the screen. In the corner there stood a 3-footed incense table, and an incense burner of hollowed white jade was diffusing swirls of light smoke, filling the entire room with the fresh fragrance of sandalwood. Lan Wangji went to discuss business with his uncle, and Wei Wuxian was pushed into this room. Lan Wangji had only just left when Wei Wuxian took the opportunity to slip out right after. He strolled around the cloud recesses and found that, just as he had expected, even if he could scale the multi-meter-high white wall, without a jade travel token, he'd still be thrown back by the rebound of the barrier and immediately track the attention of the nearby patrol. And so, Wei Wuxian could only return to the Tranquility Room. He never really got anxious when faced with problems, so he paced back and forth inside the Tranquility Room, with his hands folded behind his back, confident that he'd come up with something of a counter-solution sooner or later. The refreshing fragrance of sandalwood was cool and clean, ephemeral and luring. In his idleness, he mindlessly thought, this is the scent that was on Lanzan. The fragrance probably sank into his clothes with all the time he spent in here, practicing his Guqin and meditating. With this thought in mind, he couldn't help being drawn closer to the incense burner in the corner. As he moved, he felt a floorboard underneath his foot that was suspiciously different from the others. Out of curiosity, Wei Wuxian bent down and started knocking about. He had done plenty of grave digging and unearthing underground pits and holes in the past, so it didn't take long for him to come across a suspicious panel. It was already shocking enough to Wei Wuxian to have discovered a secret compartment within Lan Wangji's room, but when he discovered what was hidden, he became even more astonished. Once he lifted the wood panel, an aromatic fragrance that was imperceptibly mixed with the sandalwood incense permeated the room. 7 to 8 little round black jugs were revealed, all crammed into the tiny square cellar. Lan Wangji had indeed changed. He was even hiding alcohol now. Alcohol was prohibited at the cloud recesses. It was because of this very rule that the two of them had had a little fight upon their first meeting, during which Lan Wangji had spilled a jug of the Emperor's Smile that Wei Wuxian had brought back from the Guzu city, which was nestled at the foot of the mountain. After his return to Yunmeng from Guzu, Wei Wuxian never again got the chance to taste this famous and exclusive brew of Guzu. It was something that had stayed on his mind for an entire lifetime. He always said that he'd come back and try it if there was a chance, but that never panned out. As for the liquor hidden here, he didn't even need to open the jugs to test their taste. He knew by the fragrance alone that this was Emperor's Smile. He had never imagined that there would come a day when Lan Wangji, someone who abided by the rules and never touched a drop of liquor, would have his secret booze cellar be exposed by Wei Wuxian. Truly, what goes around comes around. Wei Wuxian sighed emotionally as he downed a full jug. He was a heavyweight when it came to tolerance, and loved to drink. And since Lan Wangji owed him a jug of Emperor's Smile, he thought he should collect some interest after so many years. Thus he drank another jug. Just as he was beginning to enjoy himself, the idea struck him. How hard could it be to acquire a jade travel token? Within the borders of the cloud recesses, there was a cold spring with a myriad of special effects, serving the male disciples for cultivation purposes. Apparently, it had such effects as calming of one's mind and cooling of wicked inflammation. Clothes were bound to come off when entering the cold spring, so what were the guys going to do with the jade travel tokens? Hang them from their mouths? Wei Wuxian clapped and finished the last sip of the jug in his hand. He looked around, but surprisingly did not find anywhere to toss the jugs. So he filled the 2 empty vessels with water and sealed them like they had been before, and stuffed them back into the cellar and closed the floorboard. Having done the deed, he went out in search of a jade travel token. Although the cloud recesses had burned down once in the past, before the start of the Sunshot campaign, its layout hadn't changed after the reconstruction. Wei Wuxian relied on his memories to navigate through the quiet, winding paths, and it didn't take long before he found the serene and secluded cold spring. The sect disciple guarding the cold spring was standing quite a distance away. There was another designated area for the female cultivators, so they didn't use the facilities here, and there was never anyone in the Lan clan who dared to do something as shameless as peeping. Thus, security wasn't strict and was extremely easy to deceive. Perfect for Wei Wuxian to go and be shameless himself. Just as luck would have it, a set of white robes was laying atop of a white rock of eupatorium grasses. Someone was already here. This set of white robes was so neatly folded that it made one's hair stand on end. It was like a square piece of tofu. Even the forehead ribbon was meticulously laid. When Wei Wuxian reached in to rummage for the jade travel token, he almost felt bad messing it up. He casually cast a glance at the spring and suddenly couldn't look away. The water of the cold spring was bone-bitingly freezing. Unlike hot springs, there was no steam to obscure vision, so he had a clear view of the upper back of the man in the spring. The man in the water was tall in build and fair in skin, his hair long and ink black, dripping and gathered to the side. The lines of muscle running down his back to his waist were smooth, graceful, and full of power. In short, a beauty. However, Wei Wuxian was most definitely not someone unable to avert his gaze when stunned by a bathing beauty in the first place. And it wasn't as if he was actually into men, no matter how beautiful this man was. It was because there was genuinely something in particular on this man's back that he was unable to look away. Dozens of crisscrossed scars. Those were the type of marks left behind by a discipline whip. Among the cultivating clans, there was a type of discipline whip that was used to publish scion disciples of the head family. It was reserved for those who had committed the most grievous of mistakes, and after such punishments, the scars would never fade. While Wei Wuxian had never experienced this particular lashing himself, Jiancheng had. Wei Wuxian had racked his brain to help him lighten that humiliating mark, but all efforts had been fruitless. Wei Wuxian could never mistake the sight of such a scar. Usually, a couple of lashes from the discipline whip was already a severe lesson, enough to engrave it onto one's memory forever, never to commit the same wrongs again. But there were, at minimum, 30 discipline whip scars on that man's back. What heinous crime had he committed to get whipped like this? And if it was truly so heinous, why hadn't he just been executed outright to purge the sect of such corruption? Just then, the man in the spring turned around. Below his collarbone, near the heart, was a conspicuous mark from a branding iron. When Wei Wuxian saw that brand, his surprise reached new heights. The brand has stolen all of Wei Wuxian's attention, leaving none to spare to look at the man's face. It made him question whether his eyes were mistaken. Even his breathing quickened. Suddenly, white filled his vision as if a curtain of snow had dropped. Immediately after, that snow curtain was slashed by a blue glare of the sword, which attacked like a frozen aura. There was not a single person in the world who wouldn't recognize Hung Wenjun's famous sword Bichen. Damn, this was Lan Wangji. Wei Wuxian was no stranger to dodging swords and running for his life. He dropped efficiently to the ground and rolled away, just barely dodging. He even had time to pluck a piece of grass from his hair as he fled from the cold spring. As he darted around like a headless fly, he ran into a few people on night patrol and was caught and scolded. "What are you rushing around for? The cloud recesses prohibits hurried walking." When Wei Wuxian saw that it was Lan Jinyi and company, he was overjoyed. Thinking that this presented him the perfect opportunity to get flogged off the mountain, he quickly offered himself up. I didn't see anything. I was definitely not here to peep on Hong Wenjun bathing." When the juniors heard, they were instantly shocked speechless by his audacity. Hong Wenjun was revered everywhere, considered a distinguished cultivator, never to be profaned. Both juniors and disciples of the clan respected and admired him as if he was divine. To peep on Hong Wenjun while bathing in the cold spring, just the thought of doing such a thing was an irredeemable felony. Lan Zizhui was so stricken that even his voice changed. "What? Hong Wenjun? Hong Wenjun is in there?" Lan Jinyi seized him in outrage. "Damn cutsleeve! Is that something you think you're allowed to peep at?" Wei Wuxian struck while the iron was hot and confirmed his own crimes. "I saw neither hide nor tail of Hong Wenjun's naked body." Lan Jinyi exclaimed furiously. "You just gave yourself away! What are you sneaking around here for if you didn't peep? Look at you, utterly shameless!" Wei Wuxian covered his face. "Oh, come on, don't be so loud. The cloud recesses prohibit clamor." Amidst this chaos, Lan Wangji emerged from the thickets of eupatorium grasses, draped in a white robe with his long hair flowing. While they were arguing, he had already redressed himself in a neat and tidy fashion, but Bichen had yet to be sheathed. The juniors hurriedly bowed. Lan Jinyi quickly said, "Hong Wenjun, this Mo Xiang is simply terrible. You brought him back because he was an assistant at the Mo estate, but he... Wei Wuxian thought he'd surely crossed the line enough to get kicked out this time. But unexpectedly, Lan Wangji only cast a nonchalant glance his way. After a moment of silence, Bichen was sheathed with a resounding "Xing!" Everyone dismissed. 2 simple words, yet spoken with extreme authority and without any room for objection. The crowd immediately dispersed. As for Lan Wangji, he calmly and leisurely picked Wei Wuxian up by the back of his collar and dragged him all the way back to the Tranquility Room. In Wei Wuxian's previous life, the two had been similar in stature, both slender in build and notably tall in height. Back then, Wei Wuxian had only been shorter than Lan Wangji by a tiny bit, and when they'd stood side by side, the difference had been barely noticeable. However, the situation had changed when he was roused back to life in this body. While he was still considerably taller than average folk, he was more than 5 full centimeters shorter than Lan Wangji. Caught in his grip, he couldn't even struggle. Wei Wuxian staggered, ready to scream, yet Lan Wangji coldly reprimanded him. "Troublemakers will be silenced." Throw him out of the mountain? Yes, please. Silence him? No, thank you. Wei Wuxian just couldn't figure it out. Since when had the Lan clan started tolerating such shameful crimes as peeping at their most distinguished cultivator in the bath? Was that even something that could become tolerable? Lan Wangji carried him into the tranquility room and went straight for the inner chamber, throwing him onto the bed with a thump. Wei Wuxian oomphed as he landed, and couldn't get up for a moment, squirming as he did. He had the thought to whine coquettishly to raise Lan Wangji's hackles, but when he looked up, Lan Wangji was looking commandingly down at him, standing there with bichen in hand. He was used to seeing Lan Erganzi with his hair and forehead ribbon fastened, orderly and methodical, not a single piece out of place. The sight of him now, slightly loose black hair, thinly robed, was something he had never witnessed before, so Wei Wuxian couldn't help but take a look or two. In the midst of the draggings and throwings, Lan Wangji's tightly closed collar had been tugged askew, revealing his defined collarbone, as well as the dark red branding mark below. At the sight of the brand mark, Wei Wuxian's attention was stolen again. He'd had an identical mark on his body too before he became the Yiling Patriarch. And the one on Lan Wangji now was no different from the one Wei Wuxian had from his former life, in place or in shape. It was no wonder that it looked familiar, and not strange at all. Speaking of, it wasn't only the brand mark that was strange. There were also the 30-some lash marks from the discipline whip on Lan Wangji's back. From a young age, Lan Wangji made a name for himself. He was highly commended, and the most orthodox of the distinguished orthodox cultivators, one of the twin jades in whom the Lan clan of Guzu possessed intense pride. His every word and action were regarded by the elders as a benchmark of disciple excellence. So what unfortunate crime had he committed to garner such a severe punishment? Over 30 discipline whip scars, was literally being lashed to death. And once the scars were on the body, they would remain there for a lifetime. It was so the punished would forever remember their crimes, never to commit them again. Following his gaze, Lan Wangji lowered his eyes and tugged at his collar, concealing his collarbone and hiding the scars. He was, once more, the cold as ice Hung Wenjun. Just then, the somber tolling of a bell sounded from the distance. The rules of the Lan clan were strict, their daily routines rigid. Rest at hay time, the beginning of the night, and rise at Mao time, the morning twilight. The toll of the bell served as a reminder. Lan Wangji listened closely until the tolling ended, then turned to Wei Wuxian. "You will sleep here." He turned into the room next door, without giving Wei Wuxian time to respond, leaving him sprawled on the bed, alone and confused. It wasn't like he hadn't considered the idea that Lan Wangji had guessed who he really was. It was just that such a suspicion made no sense from him. The sacrificial ritual was forbidden magic. Those who knew about it were extremely few in number to begin with. Over the years, any written knowledge passed down was, at best, fragmentary passages without any practical use. Practitioners of such magic dwindled more and more as time passed. Who knew where Mo Xiang had gotten his hands on those secret manuscripts in order to summon Wei Wuxian? There was no way Lan Wangji could have recognized him solely based on the bit he'd played in that crabby flute, could he? Wei Wuxian didn't think that he'd shared any sort of deep, consequential friendship with Lan Wangji in his past life. While they had been peers once, had had narrow escapes together and fought side by side, their meetings and partings had always been as swift as petals carried away by flowing water. Lan Wangji was a disciple of the Lan clan of Guzu, and that predetermined him to be elegant and righteous without fault, completely incompatible with Wei Wuxian's personality. Wei Wuxian felt that their relationship couldn't be called bad, but he could hardly pretend that it could have been good. He figured Lan Wangji's appraisal of him would be the same as the prevailing public opinion. Wicked and unethical, with wanton indulgence for massacre, a disaster in the making sooner or later. After Wei Wuxian defected from the Zheng clan of Yunmeng and became the Yiling Patriarch, he'd been in significant conflict with the Lan clan of Guzu, especially in the months prior to his death. If Lan Wangji really was certain that he was Wei Wuxian, then they should surely be brawling to the ends of the earth by now. And yet he didn't know if he should lament the current state of things. In the past, Lan Wangji had been unable to tolerate a single thing he did, and now Wei Wuxian had tried everything in his power to stir up trouble, and the man had just endured it. Could it be that this was the result of years of great progress? Well then, congratulations. After taking a little while to despair and stare blankly at nothing, Wei Wuxian rolled off the bed and moved extremely quietly into the next room. Lan Wangji was lying on the bed, seeming to be deep in slumber already. Wei Wuxian approached soundlessly. He still hadn't given up. He was ready to feel up the man to see if he could fish out that jade travel token that had so stubbornly eluded his endless yearning. Yet, unexpectedly, just as he reached out, Lan Wangji's long eyelashes quivered, and he opened his eyes. At that moment, Wei Wuxian made a decision and threw himself onto the bed. He remembered that Lan Wangji despised physical contact with others. Just a touch had sent him flying in the past. If the man could endure this as well, then he was definitely not Lan Wangji anymore. Frankly, he suspected Lan Wangji was also possessed. Wei Wuxian straddled Lan Wangji, his legs spread wide and bent along the man's sides. His hands pushed against the wooden bed, trapping Lan Wangji between his arms as he slowly lowered his face. The distance between their faces narrowed, getting closer and closer. So close that Wei Wuxian was practically suffocating before Lan Wangji finally spoke. Lan Wangji said after a moment of silence, "Get off." "No," Wei Wuxian replied, thick-skinned even now. A pair of light-colored eyes met Wei Wuxian's own gaze. They were barely inches apart. Lan Wangji stared unflinchingly at him and repeated, "Get off." "Nope," Wei Wuxian said. "You should have expected something like this would happen when you made me sleep here." "Like this? Are you certain?" Lan Wangji questioned. For some reason, Wei Wuxian felt this was a question that he had to consider carefully before answering. Just as he was about to curl his lips, he suddenly felt his waist go numb and his legs weaken. Then his entire person collapsed onto Lan Wangji's body. That curve not yet formed on his lips froze as his head landed on the right side of Lan Wangji's chest. He was completely immobile. Lan Wangji's voice sounded from above. His voice was low and deep, his chest gently vibrating with the enunciation of his words. "Stay like that tonight, then." Wei Wuxian had never expected this to be his fate. He jerked, wanting to get up, but his lower body remained limp and powerless. That he could do nothing but remain stuck firmly onto the hard body of another man in such an embarrassing position. He was completely dumbstruck. What happened to Lan Wangji after all these years? Why is he like this now? Is he still the same Lan Wangji from the past? He's the one possessed, right? Just as he was embroiled in internal turmoil, Lan Wangji suddenly raised himself up a bit. Wei Wuxian perked up, thinking he'd finally had enough. Yet, unexpectedly, Lan Wangji only gave a light wave of his hand, and the candle was extinguished. When Wei Wuxian reflected on it later, the start of his poor relationship with Lan Wangji could probably be traced back to the year when he was 15. That was when he and Jiang Cheng went to the Lan clan of Guzu to study for 3 months. There was a highly respected and reputable elder named Lan Qiren in the Lan clan of Guzu. Among the distinguished clans, he was publicly recognized to have 3 major traits: pedantry, pertinacity, and the proficiency for producing peerless pupils from his strict instruction. The first 2 items kept many at a respectful distance, indeed, even made some secretly abhor him. but the latter item made many others stop at nothing to finagle their children into his classes. Over the years, he had raised countless exceptional non disciples. Everyone educated under him for a couple years, no matter how terrible they were going in, would appear decent coming out. Or at the very least, their poise and etiquette would see considerable improvement. Many parents wept streaming tears of excitement when they picked up their sons upon completion of their tenure. To that, Wei Wuxian posed the question aloud. Do I not appear decent enough already? With great foresight, Jiancheng replied, You will definitely become a mark of shame on his teaching career. Aside from Jiancheng of Yunmeng, there were plenty of other young masters from other clans that year, all of whom were sent by parents who admired the reputation of the establishment. These young masters were all no more than 15 or 16 years old. The prominent clans often dealt with one another, so while the students weren't necessarily already close, they knew each other's faces. Everyone knew that although Wei Wuxian wasn't surnamed Jiang, he was the clan's chief and eldest disciple. It was also known that he was the son of an old friend of Jiang Fengming, the clan leader of the Jiang clan of Yunmeng, and that Jiang Fengming saw him as his own child. Young people often didn't care about backgrounds and blood as much as their elders, so they quickly mingled, calling each other Gaga and Didi after only a few words had been exchanged. Someone asked, The Lotus Pier of Jiang clan must be much more fun than this place, right? Wei Wuxian laughed. Whether something's fun or not depends on how you play. There's definitely not as many rules, though, and no need to get up so early. The rise at Mao and rest at He time routine of the Lan clan of Guzu was not to be disrupted. Someone else asked, When do you guys normally get up? What do you do every day? Jiancheng humphed. Him? Raise at sea, rest at show. And he doesn't practice his sword or meditate when he gets up. Instead, he's off boating, swimming, picking lotus pods, and hunting pheasants. It doesn't matter how many pheasants I go hunting, I will always be number 1. Wei Wuxian declared. A boy exclaimed, I'm going to school in Yunmeng next year. Don't anyone stop me. His spirits were immediately dampened by another. No one's stopping you. Your older brother will break your legs, that's all. That boy wilted instantly. This was the second young master of the Ni clan of Qinshi, Ni Huisang. His older brother, Ni Mingju, was a man who was swift and resolute in action, reputed for his might within the cultivation world. Although the brothers had not been born of the same mother, they shared a close relationship. Ni Mingju was extremely strict when it came to educating his little brother, and was deeply concerned with his studies. This was why, although Ni Huisang greatly admired his older brother, he also feared Ni Mingju bringing up the subject of schooling the most. Guzu is pretty fun too, Wei Wuxian said. Wei Zheng, listen to my heartfelt advice, Ni Huisang said. The cloud recesses can't compare to the lotus pier. Now that you've come to Guzu, remember never to provoke a certain person. Who? Wei Wuxian asked. Lan Shiren? No, not the old man, Ni Huisang replied. The one you need to be careful of is his favorite disciple, Lanzan. Lanzan of the twin jades of Lan? Courtesy name Lan Wangji? Wei Wuxian asked. The current clan leader of the Lan clan of Guzu had 2 sons, Lan Huan and Lanzan. Enjoying fame as the twin jades of Lan, they had been used since the age of 14 by the elders of various clans as role models to compare their own disciples to. Standing squarely under the limelight thus, their names resounded like thunder in everyone's ears. Ni Huisang continued, And that Lanzan, sheesh. He's the same age as us, but he's not lively as a boy should be, stiff and strict. He's the same as his Shufu, or worse. Oh, Wei Wuxian said. Is he the pretty good-looking fellow? Jiangcheng snickered. Who among the lands of Guzu is ugly? When it comes to enrollment, the clan rejects disciples who don't have proper facial features, you know. Find one with an average-looking face and show me. Particularly handsome, Wei Wuxian stressed and gestured to his head. Dressed in all white with a forehead ribbon and a silver sword on his back. Very pretty, but all stiff in the face, like he's mourning at a funeral. That's him, Ni Hui-sung confirmed. Then, after a pause, but he's been training in seclusion and only returned yesterday. When did you see him? Last night. Last night? Jiancheng was stunned. There's a curfew here at the cloud recesses. Where did you see him? How come I didn't know? Over there, Wei Wuxian pointed. The place he pointed was a high wall eaves. Everyone was speechless. Jiancheng's eyes were bulging, and he gritted his teeth. Causing trouble for me the moment you get here. What happened? Wei Wuxian grinned widely. Nothing happened. Didn't we pass by the Emperor's Smile liquor store on the way over? Last night I tossed and turned and finally couldn't hold it in anymore, so I went down the mountain to town and bought 2 jugs back. There's nowhere to drink that stuff in Yunmeng, you know. Then what happened to the liquor? Jiancheng demanded. Well, didn't I just hop over the eaves and get caught by him before I even got one leg over the side? Wei Wuxian replied. What luck, Wei Jiang, one of the boys said. He was probably patrolling after coming out of seclusion, and you got caught by him red-handed. Those who return at night are not permitted to enter until the end of Mo time. So why did he let you in? Jiancheng questioned. Wei Wuxian shrugged. He didn't. He was determined that I remove the leg that I'd put over. How could I do that, right? So up he came on the roof, airy and light, and demanded to know what I had in my hand. Jiancheng only felt his head throb. He had a bad feeling about this. How did you answer? Wei Wuxian replied, It's Emperor's Smile. I'll share a jug with you, so pretend you never saw me, okay? Jiancheng sighed. The cloud recesses prohibits liquor. Now you're doubly guilty. He told me the same thing too, Wei Wuxian said. So I asked him, why don't you tell me what your family doesn't prohibit? He seemed a little angry and told me to go look at the wall of discipline at the front of the main gate. Honestly, over 3,000 rules, written in ancient seal script no less. Who's going to read it? Did you? Did you? Either way, I didn't. What's there to be angry about? That's right. The group felt the same way. They started complaining about the various outdated, unfathomable rules of the cloud recesses, deeply regretting that they hadn't met each other sooner. Whose clan has over 3,000 rules without any repetition? Never mind the killing prohibited, private fights prohibited, promiscuity prohibited, night outings prohibited, clamor prohibited, but I can't believe there's also laughing without reason prohibited, improper seating prohibited, eating more than 3 bowls of rice prohibited. Wei Wuxian cut in quickly. What? Private fights are forbidden too? Jiancheng said, Yes. Please don't tell me you fought with him. I did, Wei Wuxian admitted, and knocked over a jug of Emperor's Smile too. The group slapped their thighs and exclaimed regretfully about the shame that was. The situation couldn't have gotten worse either way, so Jiancheng charged forward. Didn't you get 2 jugs? Where's the other one? Oh, I drank it. Where did you drink it? Jiancheng asked. In front of his face. I said, all right, if the cloud recesses prohibits alcohol, then I won't go in. I'll drink it on top of the wall. Then I'm not breaking any rules, right? And then I drank every last drop in front of his face. And then? Wei Jiang, Ni Hui-sung was utterly shocked. You're so arrogant. Wei Wuxian arched his brows. Lan Wenzhi's skills are pretty good. You're dead, Wei Jiang. Lanzan has never suffered such grief from anyone before. He's never going to take his eyes off you now. You better watch out. Lanzan may be in the same class as us, but he's in charge of the punishments of the Lan clan. Wei Wuxian wasn't scared in the least. He waved dismissively. What's there to be scared of? Didn't they say Lanzan is a child prodigy? If he's so precocious, then his Shufu should have taught him everything by now, and he should be spending his days in secluded cultivation without any free time to keep an eye on me. Before he finished, the group rounded the corner of the garden-windowed wall, and saw a white-clad youth sitting poised and proper within the orchid room. His long hair and forehead ribbon were fastened, and the air around him seemed to be shrouded in icy frost. He shot them a frigid look. It was as if dozens of mouths had been suddenly struck by the silent spell. They quickly entered the orchid room, quietly picked out their seats, and quietly left alone any seat around Lan Wangji. Jianzheng tapped Wei Wuxian's shoulders and whispered, "His eyes are on you. Best of luck." Wei Wuxian only needed to turn his neck to see Lan Wangji's side profile. Exceptionally handsome and refined, with long, delicate lashes, his posture was incomparably upright, eyes to the front. He wanted to start a conversation, but just then, Lan Xiren stepped into the orchid room. Lan Xiren was tall and thin, his back as straight as a brush. Although he had a long black goatee, he was most definitely not old, and in line with the Lan clan of Guzu's tradition of birthing beautiful men every generation, he was most definitely not ugly. Unfortunately, however, a pedantic air surrounded him, so calling him an old man was not out of place in the least. He entered with a scroll in hand, and when opened, it unrolled long and far across the floor. He then started lecturing them on the rules of the Lan clan just like that, his grip on the scroll firm. The boys present all turned ashen as they listened. Wei Wuxian was bored, his eyes flickering all over, and they eventually flickered back to Lan Wangji's side profile. Seeing how the boy appeared genuinely focused and stern, he was astounded in spite of himself. How does he manage to pay such serious attention to something so boring? Suddenly, up at the front, Lan Xiren threw the scroll down on the floor and sneered. "This is all engraved upon the stone wall, but as no one's read it, it seems I must now repeat every rule one by one. Let us see if there's anyone else using ignorance as an excuse for their transgressions. Seeing as there are those who are still inattentive despite the explanation, very good. I shall lecture on something else." Although his words applied to everyone in the orchid room, Wei Wuxian had a hunch that this was a warning targeted at him. Sure enough, Lan Xiren called out, "Wei Ying." "Present," Wei Wuxian answered. "Let me ask you, are Yao, demons, ghosts, and monsters the same thing?" Wei Wuxian replied with a grin, "No." "How are they not? How are they different?" Yao are formed from non-human living beings. Demons are formed from living beings. Ghosts are formed from deceased humans. And monsters are formed from non-human deceased. Yao and monsters are easily confused. Give an example of their difference. Easy. Wei Wuxian pointed at a lush green tree outside the orchid room. For example, a living tree, should it breathe in the air of scholarship, could cultivate over the span of a century into a spirit and form its own consciousness, and also develop a taste for causing mischief for a living. Such is a Yao. Then I take up an axe and cut the tree down, leaving a dead tree stump, and that stump cultivates into a spirit. Such is a monster. What was the profession of the founder of the Ni clan of Qinshi? Butcher. The family insignia of the Jin clan of Lanling is a white peony. What variety of white peony is it? Sparks amid snow. Who was the first within the cultivation world to focus on strengthening the clan and weakening the sect? The founder of the Wen clan of Qingshan, Wen Mao. He answered fluently and without hesitation, with trepidation. While they felt relieved, they also prayed that he would never be stumped. Please, let him absolutely continue answering like this, so Lan Xiren wouldn't have the chance to pick somebody else. However, Lan Xiren said, "As a disciple of the Qiang clan of Yunmeng, you should be so familiar with all this information that you can recite it without issue. There should be no pride taken in answering correctly. Let me ask you something else. There is an executioner who executed hundreds while alive. His parents and wife are alive and well. He was murdered in town, his corpse lying in the open air for 7 days, brewing resentment. He now haunts and perpetrates violence. What is to be done?" This time, Wei Wuxian didn't immediately respond. The others thought that he was stumped and began to fidget in their seats. Lan Qiren berated, "What are you all looking at him for? Everybody think, and do not look at your books." The students hastily removed the books that they were about to frantically flip through, and were stumped as well. Murdered in the town, a corpse in open air for 7 days. It was the very definition of a major malicious ghost, a great fierce corpse, super difficult to handle. They prayed Old Man Lan would skip over them for this question. Seeing how Wei Wuxian hadn't come up with an answer after a while, only looking contemplative, Lan Qiren said, "Wanji, tell him what has to be done." Lan Wangji did not look in Wei Wuxian's direction, but only nodded in respect. He then responded in a colorless tone. "First, deliverance. Second, suppression. Third, obliteration. Confer with the family and endeavor to learn how to fulfill his dying wish. One must absolve him of his obsession in order to ensure that he is released. If the attempt proves futile, then one must suppress him with decision and with force. If his crimes are excessively heinous and his resentment still not to be dispersed, his existence cannot be tolerated. In this case, he must be eradicated. In discharging duty, cultivators must heed this order without error." The class heaved a long sigh, inwardly thanking the heavens and the earth. Thank goodness the old man had picked Lan Wangji. If their turn had come, they would have missed some points or gotten the order wrong. Lan Qiren nodded, pleased. "Not a word amiss." After a pause, he added, "Should it be cultivation or conduct, one must always build such a solid foundation. If one is proud and arrogant, unruly and divergent simply because of a false reputation earned from defeating simple mountain spirits, then it invites nothing but future humiliation." Wei Wuxian quirked his brows and cast a glance at Lan Wangji's profile. So this old man really was targeting me. Calling his prized pupil to come to class was nothing more than an attempt to show me up. "I have a question," he said. "Speak," Lan Qiren said. Wei Wuxian said, "Although deliverance is the first step, deliverance is often impossible. Fulfill his wish, absolve his attachment, is easier said than done. If his wish is for a new set of clothes, then sure. But if it's to kill an entire family for revenge, then what is one to do?" Lan Wangji repeated, "Deliverance is supplemented by suppression when required. Obliterate when necessary." Wei Wuxian smiled at this response. "What a waste of resources!" After a pause, he continued, "It wasn't that I didn't know the answer. I was just thinking of a fourth option." "I've never heard of any fourth option," Lan Qiren said. "This executioner died a horrible death, so him transforming into a fierce corpse is inevitable," Wei Wuxian said. "Since he executed hundreds while alive, why not dig up the graves of those hundreds, awaken their resentment, fuse their skulls, and have them fight the fierce corpse?" Lan Wangji finally turned his head to look at him. His expression remained impassive, yet his brows were tightly knit. Lan Qiren was shaking so hard even his goatee was trembling. He shouted, "Such ignorance!" Everyone within the orchid room was stunned, and Lan Qiren shot to his feet. "The purpose of exorcism is deliverance. Not only do you pay no thought to the deliverance methods, you want to awaken resentful energy? You are reversing the proper order of things, disregarding ethics." Wei Wuxian argued, "Some creatures are impossible to deliver anyways, so why not make use of them? When Yu the Great was taming the waters, he already knew that blockage was an unwise plan, and that the redirection was the way. Suppression is a form of blockage, so isn't it unwise as a method?" Lan Qiren hurled a book at him, and he ducked, continuing his nonsense without batting an eye. "Spiritual chi is energy. Resentment is also energy. Spiritual chi is stored within the dantain and can be used for all kinds of great feats. So why can't resentful chi be used in the same way?" Lan Qiren hurled another book his way and exclaimed sharply, "Then let me ask you this. How will you guarantee that this resentful Qi will remain under your control and not harm others? Wei Wuxian ducked as he answered, Haven't thought that far yet. Lan Qiren was outraged. If you had, then the cultivation world would have no place for you. Get out! Wei Wuxian couldn't have been happier to oblige, and quickly got the hell out. He sauntered aimlessly about the cloud recesses, spending half the day playing in the greenery. When class was dismissed, it took a while before they found him on top of a wall. Wei Wuxian was sitting atop the black tiles by the head of the wall with a sprig of grass dangling from his lips, his face resting on his right hand. He had one leg propped up, while the other one dangled down, swaying lightly. The people down below pointed at him. Wei Xiang, you're amazing! He told you to get out and you actually left! He couldn't wrap his head around what had happened for the longest time after you left. His face was so sour. Still with the grass in his mouth, Wei Wuxian shouted down in response. I answered his question and got out when he told me to. What else does he want from me? Ni Huisang chimed in. Why does it seem that Old Man Lan is particularly strict with you, calling you out in front of everybody to scold? Zheng humphed. Serves him right. What's with those answers? All that nonsense is okay to say at home, whatever, but to say it in front of Lan Qiren, he is asking for it. Wei Wuxian replied, He won't like me either way, so I might as well say what I want. Besides, it's not like I'm calling him names. Ni Huisang complimented this. Then envy began to surface on his face. What Wei Xiang said is actually very interesting. Obtaining a spiritual qi requires cultivating and laborious forming of a golden core. Who knows how long that'll take someone like me? Any aptitude I have seems like it got chewed up by the dogs in my mom's womb. But resentful qi, that's abundantly produced by those nefarious creatures out there. If it could be put to use, how nice would that be? The golden core was a core formed within the body of a cultivator once they had cultivated to a certain level, and its purpose was to store and generate spiritual energy. Once a core formed, one's cultivation power would skyrocket and would become greater and more cultivated, surmounting the highest peaks. Without a core, one was considered to be an unqualified cultivator. If a prominent sect's junior formed their core too late, it would be too great an embarrassment to speak of. Ni Huisang wasn't the least bit ashamed, however, and Wei Wuxian also laughed in response. Right? It would be a waste not to use it. Enough, Zheng warned. You can talk about it all you want, but don't actually go down that devious path. Wei Wuxian laughed. Why would I leave the grand avenue under the sun to walk a single plank bridge in the shadows? If it was that easy to walk it, somebody would have done so already. Relax, he's asking his questions and I'm just answering them. Hey, you guys coming? Come hunt pheasants with me before curfew starts. Jiangcheng scolded. What pheasants? Where did you see pheasants here? Go transcribe the Righteousness Collection. Lan Qiren told me to tell you to copy the High Justice chapter 3 times so you can learn the ethics and natural law are all about. The Righteousness Collection was the Lan family precepts. Their family precepts were so numerous that Lan Qiren had edited and assembled them into a thick collection, and the Highest Justice and the Standard Etiquette chapters took up most of the work. Wei Wuxian spat out the sprig of grass in his mouth, dusted off his boots, and said, Copy 3 times. I'll ascend after the first time. I'm not a Lan, and I don't plan to marry into the Lans, so why do I need to copy their family precepts for, huh? I refuse. Ni Huisang quickly said, I'll copy it for you. There's always something fishy about someone being so helpful for nothing, Wei Wuxian said. Go on, tell me, what do you need from me? You see, Wei Xiang, Ni Huisang explained. Old Man Lan has a bad habit. He abruptly stopped mid-sentence. He cleared his throat, opened his fan, and shrank to the side. Wei Wuxian knew something was up, and when he looked around, sure enough, Lan Wangji was standing a distance away under a lush, ancient tree. With Bichen carried on his back, he was watching the group from afar. He was graceful and elegant, as if he himself was a tree of jade, mottled with the shadows of the leaves and the sun's rays. And yet his gaze was exceptionally unfriendly. Meeting his gaze was akin to plunging into an icy cellar. Everyone knew that they'd been a little too loud shouting back and forth earlier, and it was probably that commotion that had drawn him over, so they were very consciously shutting up. Wei Wuxian, however, jumped down and went over to call after him. "Wan Zhijiang!" Lan Wangji turned and left immediately, but Wei Wuxian chased after him excitedly, shouting, "Wan Zhijiang, wait for me!" That white robe and its airy sashes flashed behind the tree and instantly disappeared without a trace, a clear indication that Lan Wangji did not want to converse with him. Having been met only with his retreating figure, Wei Wuxian felt snubbed and turned back to the others to excuse himself. "He ignored me." "Yeah," Ni Huiseng replied. "Looks like he doesn't like you very much, Wei Xiang. Lan Wangji usually... No, he's never this rude." "He hates me already? I was gonna apologize." Jiancheng said sardonically, "Now you're apologizing? Too late. Just like his Shufu, he probably thinks that you're completely evil, a bad apple. He won't care to give you the time of day." Wei Wuxian didn't care. He chuckled aloud. "He can ignore me all he wants. It's not like he's that pretty." But when he thought about it, yes, the boy was indeed that pretty. So he nonchalantly passed that pouty feeling to the back of his mind. 3 days later, Wei Wuxian finally became intimately familiar with Lan Qiren's bad habit. Lan Qiren's lectures were excessively and incomparably long, and everything had to be tested on or written out from memory alone. The changes of the cultivation clans throughout the generations, the division of power, distinguished cultivators and family quotes, the clan pedigree. Attending these lectures was like listening to the incomprehensible scripture of the heavens, and writing from memory was like slavery. Ni Huiseng helped Wei Wuxian copy Highest Justice twice, and before the exam, he begged him for aid. "Please, I beg you, Wei Xiang. This is my 3rd year attending school at Guzu. If I get another Yi evaluation, my older brother will break my legs for sure. Differentiating between the bloodlines, the collateral bloodlines, head families or branch family, juniors from prominent clans like us can't even keep our own relatives straight. Any relatives twice removed, we just call them aunts and uncles or whatever. Who has the extra brain power to memorize someone else's family?" During the exam, all the little cheat sheets flying about were intercepted by the sudden appearance of Lan Wangji, who also caught the troublemaking ringleaders. Lan Qiren was outraged and sent letters to every major clan to lodge complaints with profound bitterness. Although this gang of juniors had been unable to sit still at first, at least no one had started anything, managing to keep their butts stuck to their calves. But once Wei Ying had showed up, the brats who previously hadn't dared to act out were all encouraged to mischief, venturing out at night, drinking alcohol, doing as they pleased. The trend of delinquency grew as time went by. This Wei Wuxian really was what he had expected, the largest threat to humanity. Jiang Fengmain replied, "Ying has always been thus. Thank you, Lan Jingqian, for taking the trouble to discipline him." And so Wei Wuxian was punished again. He didn't care at first. It was just book copying, right? He never lacked for people willing to help. Yet unexpectedly, this time, Ni Huiseng said, "Wei Jiang, I'd love to help, but I can't. Good luck holding out on your own." "What?" Wei Wuxian said. Old Ni Huiseng paused and then continued. "Lan Xiansheng said that this time you have to copy the highest justice and standard etiquette at the same time." Standard etiquette was the most tedious chapter of the 12 in the Lan clan precepts, referencing classics, lousy and long and amazingly replete with uncommon words to boot. One would lose all interest in life after copying it once. Copy it 10 times and you'd ascend on the spot. Ni Huiseng added, "He also said that no one's allowed to hang around you for the duration of the punishment, and no one is allowed to help you copy it out." Wei Wuxian was amazed. How would he know if I had somebody help me copy it or not? What, is he going to have somebody supervise me or something? Correct, Jiang Cheng said. What? Jiang Cheng said, he said that you're not permitted to go out anymore. Every day you're only to go straight to the lawn library pavilion and copy the book, and you'll reflect on yourself against the wall for a month while you're at it. Of course, there'll be somebody watching you. As for who that is, there's no need for me to elaborate, is there? Inside the library pavilion. A verdant mat and a wooden desk. 2 dishes of candles and 2 people. In one end, one sat poised and proper. On the other, Wei Wuxian sat copying a dozen pages of standard etiquette, and his head was swimming. Feeling bored, he abandoned the brush for a breath of fresh air and peered over to the opposite side. Back in Yunmeng, there had been plenty of girls at the Jiang household envious that he would attend the same school as Lan Wangji, saying that the Lan clan of Guzu produced beautiful men every generation, and the twin jades, the 2 Lan brothers, were particularly exceptional. Wei Wuxian hadn't initially had the chance to scrutinize Lan Wangji's full face properly, but now that he had, he let his thoughts fly. He is fairly pretty. His face is nothing to pick on. I just really want those girls to come see for themselves that if you constantly wear a profoundly bitter scowl like you just lost your parents, you can't be saved no matter how pretty you are. Lan Wangji was transcribing anew the ancient books that had been stored in the Lan Pavilion Library for ages, but which were too inconvenient to bring out to show outsiders. His brushstrokes were unhurried and deliberate, the writing proportioned and its characters clean. Wei Wuxian blurted praise in spite of himself. Beautiful writing, best of the best. Lan Wangji remained unmoved. Wei Wuxian seldom kept his mouth shut for such a long expanse of time. He was gonna go crazy. He thought, this guy is so dull. If I sit here with him for hours a day for an entire month, won't that kill me? Having thought this, he couldn't help but lean forward a bit. Wei Wuxian was very good at finding ways to amuse himself, and he was especially an expert at finding joy amidst suffering. Since there was nothing else to play with, he could only play with Lan Wangji. Wangji Zhang, he said. Lan Wangji steadfastly stood his ground. Wei Wuxian tried again. Wangji. It fell on deaf ears. Wei Wuxian continued. Lan Wangji. Wei Wuxian persisted. Lan Zan. Lan Wangji finally paused in his writing and looked up with a cold gaze. Wei Wuxian dodged back, raising his hands in defense. Don't look at me like that. I only called you by your birth name because you won't answer to Wangji. If you're not happy about it, you can call me by my birth name too. Put down your legs, Lan Wangji said. Wei Wuxian's sitting position was extremely improper, with his body slouched and his legs propped up. Seeing that he'd finally been able to tease Lan Wangji into talking, he was secretly delighted, like he'd seen the bright moon at last after waiting for the clouds to part. He obediently put his legs down, but leaned forward in the process without realizing it, his arms pressing down on the desk, still in an unmannerly sitting position. He asked sternly, Lan Zan, I have a question for you. Do you really hate me? Lan Wangji lowered his eyes, his lashes casting light shadows over his jade-like cheeks. Wei Wuxian said promptly, Oh, don't, ignoring me after so few words. I want to offer you an apology, to say sorry. Look at me. After a pause, he continued, Won't look at me? Fine, then I'll go ahead. It was my fault that night, and I was wrong. I shouldn't have scaled the wall, and I shouldn't have drunk the booze. I shouldn't have fought you. But I swear I wasn't trying to provoke you on purpose. I really didn't look at your family's rules. The family precepts of the Jiang clan are passed down by word of mouth. Nothing is written down. I never would have done any of that otherwise. He thought to himself, Never would have drunk an entire jug of Emperor's Smile in your face. I would have tucked it in my robes and snuck it back to my room to enjoy. I'd drink it every day, and I'd share it with everyone until we all were completely full. He continued out loud. Besides, let's be reasonable here. Who was the one who started the fight? You. If you hadn't made the first move, we could have talked properly and cleared up this little misunderstanding. But if someone attacks me, I have to fight back. You can't blame me for that. Lanzan, are you listening? Look at me. Lan Ganzi. He snapped his fingers. Lan Gaga. Come on, grant me some face. Look at me. Without lifting his eyes at all, Lan Wangji said, Transcribe it all an additional time. Wei Wuxian instantly slumped to the ground. Don't be like that. I said I was sorry. Lan Wangji exposed him heartlessly. You are not remorseful in the least. Wei Wuxian said without any dignity, I'm sorry. I can say it as many times as you like. I will even kneel and say it. Lan Wangji put down his brush. Wei Wuxian thought that he had finally had enough and was going to punch him, but just as he was about to flash him a silly grin, he suddenly realized that his upper and lower lips were glued together, and he couldn't laugh any more. His expression dropped drastically, and he struggled to speak. Lan Wangji closed his eyes and let out a small sigh. When he opened his eyes anew, he was tranquil once more, picking up his brush as if nothing had happened. Wei Wuxian had already heard of the abominable Lan clan's silencing spell, but he had refused to believe the hearsay that it could actually silence him. Yet after doing all he could, scratching his lips until they were red, he still couldn't open his mouth no matter what. And so he pulled out a sheet of paper, his brush flying over it rapidly before he tossed the note over. Lan Wangji cast a glance in his direction and said, Frivolous. Then he rolled the paper into a ball and tossed it. Wei Wuxian rolled on his mat in a fit of anger, then crawled up and scribbled on another one, slapping it down in front of Lan Wangji. It was once again rolled into a ball and tossed out. The silence spell lasted until he finished copying. When he came to the library pavilion the next day, the paper balls strewn over the floor from the day before had all been cleared away. Wei Wuxian had always been the type of person who would forget the pain once the wound had healed. He'd suffered at the hands of the silence spell the very day before, but after sitting for 3/4 of an hour, he was restless again. It only took a few brashly spoken words before he was silenced once more. Since he couldn't talk, he doodled all over the papers and shoved them all over to Lan Wangji's side of the table, where they were all balled up into balls and tossed to the ground. 3 days passed in this way. Having been silenced repeatedly thus, upon the last day of the wall reflection, Lan Wangji thought that there was something off about Wei Wuxian. During his stay at Guzu, he had left his sword all over the place. Never once was he seen carrying it. Yet today, he had brought it and placed it next to the desk. What was more, instead of launching into his usual routine of endlessly annoying and harassing Lan Wangji, he did not utter a single word, but took up the brush as soon as he sat down. He was so obedient, it was peculiar. Lan Wangji had no reason to cast the silence spell. He took another look at him, and then another, as if he couldn't believe that Wei Wuxian had all of a sudden decided to settle down. Sure enough, Wei Wuxian didn't sit for long before he started acting up again. He sent a sheet of paper over, gesturing for him to take a look. Lan Wangji thought that it would be more nonsensical, frivolous words, but something made him glance at it anyways. And it was a portrait. The subject was sitting prim and proper, reading silently by the window, the expression and demeanor remarkably realistic. It was him. Wei Wuxian saw that he hadn't moved his eyes away from the paper and curled his lips, quirking his eyebrows at him. And he winked. There was no need for words. His meaning was plain as day. Does it look like you? Is it good? Lan Wangji said unhurriedly, To waste time doodling instead of copying the text. I believe your punishment will never end. Wei Wuxian blew at the still wet ink on the portrait and replied nonchalantly, Oh, I already finished, so I'm not coming back tomorrow. Lan Wangji's long, slender fingers seemed to falter for a second over the yellowed scrolls before flipping to the next page, surprisingly not silencing him. Seeing how his tricks didn't work, Wei Wuxian lightly tossed the drawing his way. For you. The drawing landed on the mat, but Lan Wangji showed no signs of taking it. In the past few days, Wei Wuxian had written to curse him, to curry favor, to admit fault, to beg for mercy, to scribble out random drawings. The papers were all treated the same, and so he was used to it and didn't mind. Suddenly he said, "Oh, I forgot, there's something I have to add for you." He then picked up the paper and a brush, adding a few strokes. He looked at the drawing, then at the real person, and then fell on the ground laughing. Lan Wangji placed the book down that he was holding and cast the paper another glance. As it turned out, was a flower next to his ear in the drawing. His lips seemed to have twitched. Wei Wuxian crawled upright and cut in first. "Frivolous, right? I know you're going to say frivolous. Can you at least switch it up, maybe add a word or two?" Lan Wangji said coldly, "Exceedingly frivolous." Wei Wuxian clapped. "Added another word, as expected. Thank you." Lan Wangji withdrew his gaze and picked up the book that he had placed on the desk earlier, flipping it open anew. He had only taken a look before he threw it away as if he had been burned by fire. What he had been reading before was a Buddhist sutra. When he opened the book and glanced at it just now, his vision was assaulted by naked, entwining figures, revolting to the eye. The volume he had been reading at first had been swapped for erotica, with a cover to disguise it as a sutra. He didn't need a brain in his head to guess who had done this good and generous deed. It had to be a certain someone who had done it while he was distracted by the drawing. Not to mention, Wei Wuxian had no intention of pretending otherwise at all, and was laughing uproariously while slapping the table. That book was thrown to the ground as Lan Wangji instantly retreated to the corner of the library pavilion, as if he was avoiding a venomous creature. He roared in extreme outrage. "Wei Ying!" Wei Wuxian was laughing so hard he was practically rolling underneath the desk. Arduously did he finally raise his hand. "Here, I'm here." Lan Wangji swiftly drew Bi Qian. Wei Wuxian had never seen him so flustered in the time that they had known each other. He hastily grabbed his own sword, flashing 3 parts of the blade out of the sheath and reminding him, "Manners, Lanerganzi, watch your manners. I've brought my sword today too. If we start fighting, what's going to happen to your family's library pavilion?" He had already anticipated that Lan Wangji would be shamed into anger, so he had brought the sword for self-defense, in case Lan Wangji accidentally stabbed him to death in his rage. Lan Wangji pointed at him with his sword, those light-colored eyes practically shooting flames. "What kind of person are you?" "What else can I be?" Wei Wuxian replied. "A man." "Shameless," Lan Wangji denounced scathingly. "Do you need to feel shame over something like this? Don't tell me you've never seen this sort of thing." "I don't believe it," Wei Wuxian said. Lan Wangji's greatest disadvantage was not knowing how to curse. After needing a good moment to contain himself, he finally waved his sword at Wei Wuxian with a face of frozen frost. "Get out. We will fight." Wei Wuxian shook his head repeatedly, pretending to be cute and obedient. "Nope, no fighting. Don't you know, Langanzi, that cloud recesses prohibit private fights?" He was about to pick up the discarded book when Lan Wangji rushed over and took it. Wei Wuxian quickly guessed that he planned to use the book as evidence to report him. So he intentionally asked, "What are you so grabby for? I thought you weren't going to look at it. You want to now? You don't have to be so aggressive if you do, you know. I borrowed it specifically to share with you. Now that you've seen my erotica, you're my friend. And you can keep sharing. There's more." Lan Wangji was completely pale now, as he emphasized each of these words. "I will not look at it." Wei Wuxian continued to twist the truth. "Why are you grabbing it if you're not going to look at it? Keeping it for yourself? That won't do. I borrowed it from somebody else. When you're done with it, I have to return it. Hey, stay back where you are. If you get too close, I'm gonna get nervous. We can talk. You're not thinking about handing it in, are you? Who will you hand it to? To your shufu? Laner Ganzi, is that something that should be shown to clan elders? He'll definitely suspect that you've already peeked at it yourself. You're so thin-faced, won't you die of embarrassment? Lan Wangji's spiritual power poured into his right hand, and the book was ripped into thousands of shreds and swirled into the air and then fluttered down. Seeing that he had successfully destroyed the evidence, Wei Wuxian relaxed and pretended to feel regret. Oh, what a shame! He plucked a piece of the shredded paper from his hair and held it up to show Lan Wangji, who had gone pale with anger. Lanzan, you're good at everything, but that habit of yours of throwing things around is awful. Look at yourself. How many balls of paper have you tossed on the floor in the last few days? And now you're bored with paper balls, so you're ripping up paper for fun? Clean it up yourself, yeah? I'm not going to help you. Of course, he had never helped to begin with. Lan Wangji tried to endure it, but in the end he could not, and he shouted angrily, "Get lost!" Damn it, Lanzan, Wei Wuxian said. They all say that you're a shining man of virtue, a light in this world, that you have the best manners. Turns out that's only half true. The cloud recesses prohibits clamor. Didn't you know that? And you actually told me to get lost. Is this the first time you've ever told somebody something like that? Lan Wangji brandished his sword and lunged. Wei Wuxian quickly hopped onto the windowsill. I'll get lost. I'm excellent at getting lost. No need to see me out. When he jumped down from the library pavilion, he laughed boisterously like a lunatic as he charged headlong into the forest. There was already a group waiting for him there. Ni Huisong asked, "How did it go? Did he see it? What was his reaction?" His reaction? Wei Wuxian said. Did you guys not hear how loud he yelled just now? Ni Huisong was full of admiration. Oh, we heard. He told you to get lost. Wei Jiang, that's the first time I've ever heard Lan Wangji tell somebody to get lost. How did you do it? Wei Wuxian preemed triumphantly at his success. There is much to celebrate. I helped him break a rule today. You all saw that, right? The self-restraint and discipline that the world praises Lan Erganzi for collapses in front of me. Jiancheng glowered and scolded. What nonsense! What's there to be so proud of? Is it such an honor to have somebody tell you to get lost? What an embarrassment to our family. Wei Wuxian said, I was gonna apologize, but he kept ignoring me. He's always silencing me for so many days, so what if I tease him a little? Too bad about that prized erotica of yours, Fei Songzhang. I hadn't even had the chance to finish reading it yet. It was so spectacular. Lanzan really didn't get it. He got all upset when I tried to show it to him. What a waste of that face of his. It's not too much of a loss, Ni Huisong said. There's plenty more where that came from. Jiang Cheng sneered. You thoroughly embarrassed both Lan Wangji and Lan Shuren now. Get ready to die tomorrow. No one will come and collect your corpse for you. Wei Wuxian waved him off and then hooked his arm around Jiang Cheng's shoulder. Who cares? I'll tease him a bit more before I go. You've already collected my corpse so many times. One more won't hurt. Jiang Cheng struck out with a kick. Away with you! Next time you do something like this, don't let me know. And don't tell me to come watch either. In order to prevent the old stick in the mud and the lil stick in the mud from attacking him in the middle of the night and hauling him out of bed for punishment, Wei Wuxian slept hugging his sword the entire night. Who would have thought that all would be peaceful until the next morning? It was then that Ni Huisong came to see him, elated. Wei Jiang, you really have the best of luck. The old man went to attend a symposium hosted by my family in Qingxi. We don't have any classes for the next few days. The old one was gone, leaving the little one, and he was a piece of cake to handle. Wei Wuxian scrambled out of bed, tugging on his boots. He said happily, Well, doesn't fortune smile down on me today? Auspicious clouds above tell me that heaven's got my back. On the side, Jiang Cheng was wiping his sword with the utmost of care while raining on his parade. You still won't escape punishment when he comes back. Why worry about what happens to us after we die? Let's just live freely while we're still alive. I refuse to believe that I can't find a couple pheasants on this lawn mountain." The three strolled out, arms around each other's shoulders. As they passed by the Cloud Recess's reception hall, the elegance room, Wei Wuxian suddenly chuckled and stopped in his tracks. He said, amazed, "Two little stick in the lansans." A number of people emerged from the elegance room, but the ones leading the group were two young men. Their faces were sculpted out of ice and refined jade, and they were clad in attire as white as snow. Even the tassels swaying from the hilts of the swords on their back danced airily in the wind. It was only their demeanor and expressions that told the difference between them. Wei Wuxian could immediately tell that the one with the stiff face was Lan Wangji. This meant that the gentle-looking one must be the other jade twin of the Lan clan, sobriquet Zewujun, courtesy name Lan Shijian. When Lan Wangji spotted Wei Wuxian, his brow furrowed. He was practically shooting him a death glare, as if he'd be corrupted if he looked at him for a second longer. He moved his eyes to gaze into the far distance. Lan Shijian, on the other hand, smiled. "And you are?" Xiangqian gestured out of courtesy. "Jiang Yongwim of Yongmeng." Wei Wuxian gestured in courtesy as well. "Wei Wuxian of Yongmeng." Lan Shiren returned the greetings. Ni Huisong squeaked, his voice soft like a mosquito. "Shichen-gege." Lan Shichen said, "Huisong, I just recently returned from Qingche. Your older brother has been asking about your studies. How go things? Will you be able to pass this year?" "For the most part, yeah." Ni Huisong was like a wilted squash after the frost, looking pleadingly at Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian grinned widely. "Zewujun, where are you off to?" "To exterminate water ghosts," Long Shijian replied. "We are short of capable hands, so I returned to find Wanji." Lan Wangji said coldly, "Xiangjiang, no need to talk overmuch about the matter. Time is of the essence. Let us depart." Wei Wuxian quickly stopped him. Hold on. I know how to catch water ghosts. Zewujun, why don't you bring us along?" Lan Shichen smiled, but did not speak, and Lan Wangji said, "It is against the rules." "How is it against the rules?" Wei Wuxian demanded. "We're always catching water ghosts back in Yunmeng. Besides, it's not like there's school for the next few days." Yunmeng was replete with lakes and other bodies of water, teeming with water ghosts, so the Jiang clansmen truly were experts in this area. Jiangqiang also wanted to regain the considerable amount of face that the Jiang clan of Yongmeng had lost during the days while they were at the Lan sect, so he chimed in. "That's right, Zewujun, we can definitely help." "Unnecessary. The Lan clan of Guzu can also—" Lan Wangji hadn't finished when Lan Shichen said with a smile, "That may not be a bad idea. Thank you in advance. Go make your preparations, and we'll all depart together. Will Huisong join us?" Although Ni Huisong wanted to go with the party, the sight of Lan Shichen reminded him of his older brother, and guilt seized him, so he didn't dare lark about. "I'll pass. I'll go back and review my studies." This studies posturing was done in hopes that next time Lan Shichen would say more good things about him in front of his older brother. As for Wei Wuxian and Zhengqiang, they returned to their rooms to make preparations. Lan Wangji watched their retreating backs with a puzzled frown. "Zhengqiang, why bring them? Joking and larking about is unsuitable during spirit extermination." Lan Shichen replied, "Sect leader Zhang's chief disciple and his only son have a fair reputation in Yongmeng. They may not only know how to joke and lark about." Lan Wangji did not reply to this, but his face was written with a certain sentiment that could have said, "I beg to differ." Lan Shichen added, "Besides, are you not amenable to the offer of the company?" Lan Wangji was dumbfounded. Lan Shichen explained, "I only agreed because I saw that you looked like you might want sect leader Zheng's eldest disciple to come with us." It was a good moment before Lan Wangji said arduously, "Nothing of the sort." He wished to defend himself further, but Wei Wuxian and Jiang Cheng had already returned speedily, their swords on their back. Thus, Lan Wangji had no choice but to remain silent, and the group mounted their swords and took off. The place haunted by the water ghosts was called Kai Town, and it was more than 10 kilometers away from the cloud recesses. Kai Town was woven through with scores of waterways. It could have been said that the little city was covered with a dense net formed of tangled rivers, or perhaps that it was the densely packed local houses among the shores were what covered the cobweb-like waterways. The truth of it was unclear. Lined by the little houses with white walls and gray-tiled roofs, the riverways were crowded with boats filled with men and women, and baskets upon baskets. Blooming bouquets, fresh vegetables and fruits, bamboo crafts and cakes, tofu and tea, and fine silk. All sorts of teeming trade bustled along the riverway. Guzu was situated in Jiangnan, and the lilting local dialect was soft and sweet to the ear. 2 of the boats crashed head-on, toppling several jugs of sticky rice liquor. But even the resulting argument between the 2 boatmen sounded like the chirping of birds. There were many lakes in Yunmeng, but such small water towns were few and far between. Wei Wuxian watched curiously, then took out some money to buy 2 jugs of the sticky rice liquor, passing one to Jiang Cheng. The way the Guzu people speak is so kittenish. How is that arguing? They should see how the people of Yunmeng argue. They'd be terrified. Lanzan, why are you looking at me like that? I didn't get you one, but not because I'm stingy. People of your clan aren't allowed to drink, right? Without further ado, the group boarded dozens of little sampans, pulling toward where the water ghosts were gathering. The locals crowding either shore gradually lessened in number, and the riversides also became still and quiet. Wei Wuxian and Jiang Cheng each took over a sampan, and were racing to see who could go faster while listening to the arrangements concerning the local evil water ghosts. This riverway led to a vast lake called Biling Lake. For decades, there had never been any hauntings by water ghosts at Kei City. In recent months, however, there had been many who fell into the water in this waterway, as well as Biling Lake, and cargo ships would randomly sink. Many days ago, Lan Shichen had set up an array to cast a net. He thought that he could capture a few ghosts on his first attempt. Who could have imagined that he would catch over a dozen instead? Once the faces of those corpses were washed and the bodies were brought to the nearby town for inspection, a surprising number of them remained unclaimed. None of the locals knew them. When the array was set up again just yesterday, plenty more had been captured. Wei Wuxian commented, "It doesn't really appear to be a case where they drowned elsewhere and then were washed down to these currents. Water ghosts are territorial sorts. They often only recognize only one body of water, the one where they drowned. Very seldom do they leave it." Lan Shichen nodded. "Correct. Which is why I feel that this is no trivial matter, and had Wanji come, in case something unexpected happens." Wei Wuxian said, "Zewijun, water ghosts are all super intelligent. If we take our time poling around like this, won't the search take forever? What if they all hide on the bottom of the lake and we can't find them?" Lan Wangji said, "We won't stop until they are all found. This is our duty." "So we use nets?" Wei Wuxian asked. "Correct," Wang Shichen said. "Could the Jiang clan of Yunmeng have another option?" Wei Wuxian smiled but did not answer. The Jiang clan of Yunmeng had also employed nets, of course, but he had always simply jumped into the river and hauled the water ghosts ashore because he was good at swimming. But that was definitely too dangerous a method for him to use in front of the Lans, lest it meet Lan Shiren's ear and get him chewed out again. He changed the subject. "It'd be good if there was something like fish bait that could lure the water ghosts to us on their own, or something that could pinpoint their locations, like a compass." "Keep your head down and watch the water. Focus on your target. You and your wild imagination." Cultivation and flying swords used to be nothing but somebody's wild imagination, too, Wei Wuxian argued. He looked down. Coincidentally, he could see the bottom of the sanpam that Lan Wangji was riding. An idea hit him, and he called out, "Lanzan, look at me!" Lan Wangji was on guard and concentrating, so he looked at him in reflex when he heard the call. But all he saw was Wei Wuxian slash the water with his bamboo pole, sending a wave of water splashing over. Lan Wangji tipped his toes and leapt lightly onto another sampan, dodging the splash. Upset that Wei Wuxian really had come just to horse around, he gritted his teeth. Frivolous. However, Wei Wuxian gave a kick to the side of the sampan that he was standing on. With the flick of his pole, the boat flipped upside down, revealing the bottom. And to the planks of the bottom there clung 3 bloated faces of ghastly pale water ghosts. The closest sect disciples immediately suppressed them. Lan Qichen smiled. Wei Ganzi, how did you know that they were at the bottom of the sanpan? Wei Wuxian knocked on the side of the sanpan. Easy, the boat draft was wrong. He was the only one on the sanpan at the time, yet the boat draft was heavier than what it would be for 2 people, so it had to have something clinging to the bottom. Experienced as expected, Lan Qichen commented. Wei Wuxian gently stirred the water with his pole. The little sanpan sped up, and he slid next to Lan Wangji. Once the 2 sanpans were side by side, he said, Lanzan, I really wasn't trying to splat you on purpose earlier. Water ghosts are shrewd, and if I had said something first, they would have run away if they had heard me. Hey, don't ignore me. Come on, look at me, Lan Ganzi. Lan Wangji condescended to cast him a glance. Why have you come? Wei Wuxian replied sincerely, to offer an apology. It was my fault last night, and I was wrong. Lan Wangji's face was faintly dark, probably because he hadn't forgotten exactly how Wei Wuxian had last offered him an apology. Despite knowing the answer, Wei Wuxian asked, Why are you so upset? Don't worry, I'm here to help today. Jiang Cheng couldn't watch this any more and piped up, If you're helping, then stop talking and get over here. One of the sect disciples said, The net is moving. Sure enough, the ropes of the net abruptly started jerking. Wei Wuxian instantly perked up. It's here! It's here! Long hair, thick as fine black silk, twirled through the dozen of little boats, and pair after pair of ghastly white hands clawed at the sides of the sanpans. Lan Wangji twisted his hand back and drew his sword. Bichen was unsheathed, and the motion cleanly sliced off a dozen wrists on the left side of the boat, leaving only the hands, their fingers still deeply dug into the wood. Just as he was going for the right side, a red glare flashed past him, and Wei Wuxian was suddenly already sheathing his sword. The strange movement in the water ceased, and the net calmed down once more. Wei Wuxian's move had been extremely fast, but Lan Wangji had still seen that it was a top-grade spiritual sword he was carrying. He asked respectfully, What is the name of your sword? Whatever, Wei Wuxian replied. Lan Wangji stared at him. Wei Wuxian thought maybe he hadn't heard properly, and repeated himself. Whatever. Lan Wangji frowned and rejected the answer. That sword has a spirit. It's disrespectful to call it whatever. Wei Wuxian sighed. Look outside the box, won't you? I'm not telling you to call it whatever. I'm saying the name of my sword is the word whatever. Sui bien. Here you go. See? He passed over his sword to show Lan Wangji the characters engraved on it. Within the engravings on the scabbard there were 2 symbols of ancient characters, and what they spelled was the word Sui bien. Lan Wangji was at a loss for words. Wei Wuxian considerately explained. You don't have to say anything. I know. You must be wondering why I gave it such a name. Everyone asks if there's a special meaning behind it. But to be honest, though, there isn't. It's just that when Jiang Shushu was bestowing the sword upon me, he asked me what I wanted to call it. I thought of over 20 names at the time and wasn't happy with any of them. So I thought, why not let Jiang Shushu give it a name instead? So I responded with, whatever. Who would have figured that when the sword was forged and came out of the kiln, it would have that word on it? Jiang Shushu said, since that's the case, let the sword be called Sui Bian. It's not actually such a bad name, don't you think? At last, Lan Wangji squeezed a word out through the cracks in his teeth. Absurd. Wei Wuxian slung the sword over his shoulder. You're too boring. The name is so much fun. It fools uptight people like you every time. Just then, within the jade-green lake, a long black shadow circled around the sampans and flashed past. Jiangcheng had just finished cutting down the water ghosts on his side and was still scanning around to see if there were any left when he saw that black shadow. It's come again! Several sect disciples pushed over the nets to pursue the black shadow in the water. Then another cry came from the other side. There's more here, too! Over on the other side, another vast black shadow sped past. Many sampans sped after it with nets, yet nothing was captured. That's weird, Wei Wuxian commented. The shape of the shadow doesn't appear to be human. It's constantly changing form, suddenly long, suddenly short, from big to small. Lanzan, on the side of your boat! On Lan Wangji's back, Bichen answered the call. It pierced through the water, and, a moment later, shot out of the river with a shrill shriek, drawing a rainbow streak. However, it had speared nothing. He gripped the sword, watching the water fixedly. Just as he was about to speak, the sword of a sect disciple nearby also flew out of its sheath, lunging towards the long black shadow swimming past in the river. However, once his sword entered the water, it never resurfaced. He prompted repeatedly with his sword hand seal to summon it back, yet nothing emerged from the depths. It was as if his sword had been swallowed by the lake and disappeared without a trace. This sect disciple, a boy around the same age as Wei Wuxian and company, blanched at the loss of his sword, turning paler by the minute. One of the older sect disciples nearby spoke up. Suchet, why would you act on your own initiative and urge your sword to enter the water, and before even finding out what's in there? Though somewhat flustered, Suchet still appeared composed enough. I saw Erganzi had already sent his sword into the water, and... He realized before he finished just how foolish he sounded. No one could compare to Lan Wangji or the sword Bichan. Lan Wangji could send his sword into the water with an enemy that was still unknown and emerge unscathed, but others might not be able to do the same. Suchet's pale face flushed with a tinge of embarrassment, as if he had suffered some sort of humiliation, and he stole a glimpse at Lan Wangji. Lan Wangji didn't look at him, however. He was staring intently at the water. A second later, Bichen flew out of its sheath once more. This time, the sword did not stab into the water. Instead, the tip flicked and lifted the black shadow that had been leaping past. With a splash, a wet black lump crashed onto the deck. Wei Wuxian stood on his toes and peeped. It was a robe. Wei Wuxian laughed so hard he almost fell headfirst into the river. Lanzan, you're amazing. This is the first time I've ever seen a water ghost's robe get pulled off during a hunt. Lan Wangji was concentrated on inspecting to see whether anything was wrong with Bichen, seeming to have made up his mind not to converse with him. Jiangcheng piped up. Shut up, you! It wasn't the water ghost swimming past below just now, only a robe. Of course, Wei Wuxian saw the same, but he couldn't not tease Lan Wangji. The thing slinking around was just a robe? No wonder the nets couldn't catch it and the swords couldn't pierce it. Its shape keeps changing. But a mere article of clothing can't possibly swallow a spiritual sword, so there must be something else in the water. At this time, the boats had already drifted to the heart of Biling Lake. The lake was extremely deep and profoundly dark in its shade of green. Suddenly, Lan Wangji raised his head slightly. We must go back immediately. Why? Lan Shijian asked. The creature intentionally lured us to the lake's heart, Lan Wangji replied. Just as he had finished, everyone felt their boats dip violently. Water rapidly flooded into the boats, and Wei Wuxian suddenly realized that the lake water of Biling Lake was no longer dark green, but closer to black. Near the center of the lake, a homogeneous maelstrom had formed without them noticing. Dozens of the boats were spinning in the maelstrom, submerged as they spun, as if they were about to be swallowed by a giant mouth. The clanging of blades being unsheathed rang all around as the party began to mount their swords. Wei Wuxian had already risen into the air, bowing his head as he looked down. However, he saw that the boat deck of sect disciple Su She, who had lost his sword in the water, had already been swallowed by the Biling Lake. The water was over his knees. He appeared fully panicked, yet did not utter any cries for help, perhaps because he was too terrified. Without hesitation, Wei Wuxian bent down and reached out, seizing his wrist and grabbing him up. With an extra person, the sword beneath his feet unexpectedly dipped, yet it continued to rise. However, it didn't climb for long before a sudden huge tug from Su She's side almost pulled Wei Wuxian off the sword. The bottom half of Su She's body had already been submerged within the black maelstrom, and it was whirling faster and faster, his body also sinking deeper and deeper, almost as if there was something lurking underwater, hugging his legs and dragging him down. Jiancheng, mounted on his sandu, had risen over 60 meters into the sky, above the surface of the lake, quite unconcerned. When he looked down, he charged back downward, quite upset. "What are you up to now?" The suction from within Biling Lake was growing progressively more powerful. While Wei Wuxian's sword excelled in dexterity and agility, a lack of strength would just happen to be its weakness, and it was forcibly pulled to lower and lower altitudes until it was close to the surface of the lake. Wei Wuxian steadied himself while yanking at Su She with both hands, shouting, "Somebody come help! If I can't get him up, then I'm gonna have to let go!" Suddenly, Wei Wuxian felt a tightening around the back of his collar, and he was lifted into the air. He twisted his head around and saw Lan Wangji had him single-handedly held by the back of the collar. While Lan Wangji only gazed impassively in another direction, he was supporting the weight of 3 people all by himself. Even as he fought against the unknown creature in the lake, they were still steadily rising higher in the air. Jiancheng was a little astounded. "Had I rushed to grab Wei Wuxian earlier, I probably wouldn't be able to make the rise as quickly and so steadily on Sandu. Lan Wangji is only around the same age as me." Right then, Wei Wuxian said, "Lanzan, the power of your sword is pretty powerful, huh? Thank you, but why are you grabbing me by my collar? Can't you just hold on to me? It's very uncomfy like this. I'll give you my hand, just drag me." "I do not touch others," Lan Wangji said coldly. "Who's this others? We are so well acquainted now," Wei Wuxian said. "We are not," Lan Wangji said. Wei Wuxian pretended to be hurt. "Why are you like this?" Jiancheng really couldn't stand it any longer and yelled, "Why are you like this? When you're being dangled in midair by your collar, maybe talk a bit less?" The group speedily retreated from Biling Lake on their swords and landed back on shore. Lan Wangji loosened his right hand's grip on Wei Wuxian's collar and composedly turned around to face Lan Xichen. "This is a waterborne abyss." Lan Xichen shook his head. "That makes things difficult then." Wei Wuxian and Jiancheng understood the moment the name waterborne abyss was dropped. The most terrifying thing in Biling Lake and this riverway wasn't some water ghost, but the flowing current within. Some rivers or lakes, due to terrain or currents, often capsize boats or drown the living. As time went on, the body of water itself could nurture a certain temper, not unlike a spoiled little miss who refused to go anywhere without extravagant clothes and gourmet food. Every so often, a cargo ship would capsize, or the living would drown as sacrifices to it. If there weren't any sacrifices, then it would seek out and create double to seize them on its own. The local people of Kaiyi Town were expert swimmers and rarely experienced tragedies such as sinking boats or drownings, so it was impossible for a waterborne abyss to be nurtured nearby. Since the waterborne abyss had appeared here, there was only one possible explanation. It had been driven here from somewhere else. Were there any areas disturbed by the waterborne abyss recently? Lan Wangji asked. Lan Xichen pointed to the sky. He wasn't pointing at anything else. He was pointing at the sun. Wei Wuxian and Zheng Zheng exchanged a look, understanding dawning on them. The Wen clan of Qishan. Within the cultivating world were countless prominent clans, both big and small, littered through the land like stars. However, there was a colossus that towered absolutely above them all, and that was the Wen clan of Qishan. The family insignia of the Wen clan was the sun, symbolizing contend the sun's glory, commiserate the sun's longevity. Their cultivation residence occupied an immense area, comparable to that of a city, and word had it that night did not fall on its walls. Thus, it was called Nightless Sky, and also known as the Nightless Immortal City. The clan was called a colossus because no matter the metric, its number of disciples, its power, its claim of land, its spiritual devices, it was head and shoulders above the rest, and none could compete. Quite a number of cultivators thought that it was the greatest honor to be a guest cultivator of the Wen clan, and based on the Wen clan's usual standards of conduct, it was extremely likely that the waterborne abyss at Kaiyi Town had been driven here by them. Although the origin of the water spirit was now known, everyone fell silent. If this was the doing of the Wen clan, then it would be pointless. No matter how much they were accused or condemned, the clan would not admit to it to begin with, and would offer no reparations, regardless. A sect disciple complained indignantly. Their clan driving the waterborne abyss here is going to cause serious trouble for Kaiyi Town. If the waterborne abyss grows and invades the waterways of the town, so many people's livelihoods will be at the whim of a monster. It's really so... To have others' messes discarded at their doorstep, the Lan clan of Guzu would surely face endless trouble going forward. Lan Xichen sighed. It's fine. Let's return to town. They boarded new boats at the harbor and pulled towards the more densely populated part of town. After passing under the arched bridge, the boats entered the waterways, and Wei Wuxian started acting up again. He tossed his bamboo pole and set one foot onto the side of the boat, checking to see if he had any hair out of place by using the water as his mirror. He acted not a bit as if he had just fought a number of water ghosts and barely escaped from the mouth of a waterborne abyss. Clear and calm and easygoing, he sent flirtatious looks to both sides of the shore. Gigi, how much for a half kilo of loquats? He was extremely youthful and brightly handsome, glowing with such exuberance that he exemplified the frivolous peach blossoms that flowed away down the river. A woman tipped her bamboo hat and smiled brightly. Little laddie, no need for you to pay. How about I give you one for free? The Wu dialect was soft and supple, refreshing and sweet. Melodic sentiment trilled from the speaker's lips while the listener's ears were filled with honey. Wei Wuxian cupped his hands in courtesy. Of course, I'd love them if they were a gift from Gigi. The woman reached into her basket. Out came flying one perfectly round golden loquat. No need for that kind of courtesy. It's for that handsome face of yours. The boats moved fast. When two met, they instantly swept past each other. Wei Wuxian spun and caught the fruit perfectly. Gigi is the most beautiful one. While he boasted and flirted on the side, Lan Wangji did not spare him a glance, appearing entirely noble in character and sterling in integrity. Pleased with himself, Wei Wuxian tossed the loquat in his hand in the air, then pointed at Lan Wangji all of a sudden. Gigi, do you ladies think he's handsome? Lan Wangji had never expected that he'd be dragged into this. Just as he was at a loss for how to respond, the women on the river all shouted in unison, "Even more handsome!" There even seemed to be snickering from men mixed in there. "Who will gift him one too, then?" Wei Wuxian asked. "If you only give me one and not him, I'm scared he'll turn into a big old sourpuss over it when we get back." Chirping laughter tittered along the entire river. Another woman came poling over. Okay, we'll give you two. Take mine. Catch, little laddie." With the second loquat captured in hand, Wei Wuxian shouted, "Gigi is most beautiful and kind. Next time I'm here, I'll buy an entire basket." The woman's voice was clear and sonorous, and she was spunkier than the first. She pointed at Lan Wangji. "Bring him, too. Come buy the loquats together." Wei Wuxian brought the loquat to the level of Lan Wangji's eyes. Lan Wangji continued to stare squarely at the boat's bow. "Take it away." And so Wei Wuxian took it away. "I knew you wouldn't want it, so I wasn't going to give it to you in the first place. Jiancheng, catch." It just so happened that Jiancheng was speeding past on another little boat, and he caught the loquat with a single hand. A smile appeared on his face, but then he immediately humphed. "Were you strutting around flirting with everything in sight again?" Wei Wuxian preened. "Get out of here." Then he turned his head and asked, "Lanzan, you're from Guzu. You know how to speak the dialect, right? Teach me, how do you tell someone off in Guzu dialect?" Lan Wangji threw him a single word, "frivolous," then boarded a different boat. Wei Wuxian hadn't really expected him to answer in the first place. He just thought that the kittenish local dialect was incredibly fun, and that Lan Wangji must have spoken it since he was young. So he was having fun teasing him. He tossed back a gulp of the sticky rice liquor. Then, with the round, black, shiny little jug dangling from his fingers, he picked up the bamboo pole and lunged over to fight Jiangxiang. Lan Wangji, on the other hand, stood side by side with Lan Xiuchen. This time, they both wore similar expressions, each appearing laden with thoughts as they contemplated how to handle the waterborne abyss, and how to inform the mayor of Kai Town of the many follow-up arrangements that had to be made. A heavily loaded cargo boat approached them from the boat's front, laden with baskets upon baskets heavy with golden loquats. Lan Wangji glanced at it, then continued to look squarely to the front. Lan Xichen, however, said, "Shall we buy a basket of loquats? If you want to try some?" Lan Wangji swept his sleeve and turned. "I do not." Then he boarded another boat again. Wei Wuxian bought a bunch of random trinkets from Kai Town to bring back to the cloud recesses, and those souvenirs were all divvied up among the other clan disciples. Since Lan Qiren had gone to Qingji, there were no lessons, and the youths let themselves loose to the extreme. They swam into Wei Wuxian and Jiangcheng's room to sprawl out on the floor, eating and drinking, arm wrestling, dice rolling, and picture book flipping all through the nights. One night, Wei Wuxian lost a dice roll and was sent to scale the wall to go down the mountain and buy Emperor's Smile. This time, everyone was finally able to get their fill of the gourmet liquor. Yet unexpectedly, before day had broken the next morning, when the floor of the room had been strewn about with bodies of all sleeping like the dead, somebody suddenly opened the door. The sound alerted a few people. Still bleary-eyed, they saw Lan Wangji standing in the door with a face as frigid as ice and instantly jolted awake. Ni Huisang pushed crazily against Wei Wuxian, who was sleeping with his head on the ground and his body twisted about him. "Wei Jiang! Wei Jiang!" After a couple shoves, Wei Wuxian asked blearily, Who else wants to go? Jiangcheng? Well, let's go then, like I'm scared of you." Jiangcheng had drunk too much the night before, and his head was still pounding. With his eyes closed, still laying on the ground, he grabbed the first thing his hand touched and hurled it in the direction of Wei Wuxian's voice. "Shut up." That thing crashed into Wei Wuxian's chest, flapping as pages flipped. Ni Huisang looked to see that what Jiangcheng had thrown at Wei Wuxian was one of his treasured, out-of-print erotica illustration books. When he looked up again and saw Lan Wangji's frigid gaze, he felt like his soul was going to leave his body. Wei Wuxian grumbled, hugging that book, and passed out again. Lan Wangji entered the room, seized Wei Wuxian by the back of the collar, picked him up, and hauled him out the door. Wei Wuxian was dragged thusly for a while, then stared blearily for a moment before finally becoming somewhat awake. He twisted his neck back. "Lanjan, what are you doing?" Lan Wangji didn't say a single word, dragging him onward without pause, and Wei Wuxian woke up some more. The other sleeping corpses also jolted awake, one by one. When Jiangcheng saw that Wei Wuxian had been taken by Lan Wangji again, he rushed out. "What's going on? What are you doing?" Lan Wangji looked back and enunciated each word. "Collecting punishment." Jiancheng's mind was still slowed by drink and sleep. Only now did he remember the mess strewn on the ground in the room. Recalling the countless Cloud Recess's rules that they had broken last night, his face froze. Lan Wangji dragged Wei Wuxian to the ancestral hall of the Lan clan of Guzu, where a number of older sect disciples were waiting patiently. There were a total of 8 of them, 4 of whom held incredibly long sandalwood ferrules in their hands. The ferrules were densely carved with squared words, the very picture of austerity. Seeing that Lan Wangji had dragged the penitent over, 2 immediately approached and firmly pushed Wei Wuxian down. Wei Wuxian half knelt on the ground, unable to struggle, and asked, "Lanzan, are you going to punish me?" Lan Wangji only stared at him, coldly, unspeaking. "I won't concede," Wei Wuxian said. Just then, the other youths, who were mostly awake now, also came running over, but they were blocked outside the ancestral hall, unable to enter. They were anxious and helpless, and when they saw those ferrules, also scared speechless. However, Lan Wangji lifted the hem of his white robe and also knelt next to Wei Wuxian. Wei Wuxian was greatly shocked by this sight and struggled to get up, but Lan Wangji shouted, "Strike!" Wei Wuxian gaped and quickly exclaimed, Wait, I can see it, Lanzan, I was wrong, ah!" Their palms and the backs of their legs were beaten by the ferrule over 100 times. Lan Wangji did not require anyone to hold him down. His back remained straight as a brush from the start, kneeling in a proper posture. Wei Wuxian, on the other hand, howled and wailed without reservation, and the disciples frowned as they watched, feeling their own flesh ache too. After the beating was over, Lan Wangji quietly stood up, bowed to the sect disciples inside the ancestral hall, then immediately left, showing no sign of having been wounded. Wei Wuxian was the complete opposite. After he was carried out of the ancestral hall on Jiangcheng's back, he whined nonstop the entire time. The youths surrounded the two of them like bees and buzzed, "Wei Xiang, what happened exactly? Langzhan wanted to punish you, whatever, but why did he take a beating too?" Wei Wuxian was draped over Jiangcheng's back, sighing and gasping. "Ah, what a miscalculation. It's such a long story." "Cut your nonsense. What exactly did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Wei Wuxian protested. "I went down to buy Emperor's Smile after losing that dice game last night, right?" "Don't tell me that you ran into him again," Jiangcheng said. "You got it," Wei Wuxian said. "Don't know what's with my luck, but when I scaled the wall with the Emperor's Smile, he caught me red-handed again. I suspect he really is keeping an eye on me every day." "You think everybody has that much free time, like you? And then?" Jiangcheng asked. "And then I still greeted him," Wei Wuxian replied. "I said, 'Lanzan, what a coincidence, it's you again.' But of course, he ignored me again and came striking with his hand without even so much as a word. I said, 'Come on, why do this?' And he said, 'Should guests violate curfew too many times, they should have to collect their punishment at the Lan Ancestral Hall.' And I said, 'There are only 2 of us here. If you don't say anything, then I don't say anything, then no one would know that I broke curfew, am I right? I promise that it'll be the last time. We're so well acquainted now. Can't you just grant me some face this one time and let me off easy? Everyone grimaced. Wei Wuxian continued. In the end, he told me that we weren't so well acquainted, and he lunged at me with his sword without holding back at all. So I had to put the Emperor's smile aside and parry him. He used his palms and fists, too. He was coming at me hard. I couldn't get rid of him at all. In the end, I got really tired of the chase, so I asked, "You sure you won't let me go? You won't let me go?" And he still said, "Collect your punishment." The youths had their hearts in their throats listening to the story, and Wei Wuxian was exalted in his storytelling. Completely forgetting that he was still on Jiang Cheng's back, he gave Jiang Cheng's shoulder a forcible slap. I said, "Sure," and then I stopped dodging, pounced, and grabbed onto him, and then we both fell outside the cloud recess's wall. And so the two of us had both fallen outside the boundary of the cloud recesses, Wei Wuxian said. That fall made me see stars, I tell you. Ni Huisong was already blank. He didn't break free? Oh, he tried, Wei Wuxian replied, but I had him locked real good with all 4 of my limbs, and he couldn't break free of my body even if he wanted to. There was no way. He went stiff as a board. I said, "How's that, Langzan? Now you're outside the cloud recesses too. You and I both violated curfew. Don't go and be strict on others and not on yourself, yeah? Ow. If you punish me, then you have to punish yourself too. Everyone's equal. How's that?" He looked ghastly after he got up, Wei Wuxian continued. I sat next to him and I said, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone else. Only you, me, and the heavens and the earth will know about this." Then he left without a word. Ow. Who knew that he'd pull something like this in the morning? Jiang Cheng, could you slow down? You're going to throw me off. Not only did Jiang Cheng want to throw Wei Wuxian off, but he practically wanted to bash his head into the ground and create a human-shaped crater. So fussy, even though I'm carrying you. I didn't tell you to carry me, Wei Wuxian reasoned. Jiang Cheng flew into a rage. If I didn't carry you, I think you'd be hanging out in their ancestral hall all day, rolling around on the floor. I can't afford this embarrassment. Lan Wangji took 50 more strikes than you, but he walked away on his own, and you're not embarrassed? Pretending to be an invalid? I don't want to carry you anymore. Get the hell off. No, I'm wounded, Wei Wuxian said. The group were jostling about on the white stone path when they just so happened to run into a white-clad man passing through with a book in his hand and stopped in surprise. Lan Xichen smiled. What's happened? Jiang Cheng felt incredibly awkward and didn't know how to answer, but Ni Huisong rushed to respond. Xichen-ge, Wei Jiang was punished with over 100 strikes from the ferule. Do you have any medicine for injuries? The one in charge of the punishment in the cloud recesses was Lan Wangji. Plus, Wei Wuxian had been lamenting and wailing to those who were escorting him. His injuries seemed serious. Thus, Lan Xichen immediately came over. Wangji administered this punishment? Wei Ganzi, can you not walk anymore? What exactly happened? Jiang Cheng was of course too sheepish to say that it was because of something that Wei Wuxian had done, and when they got down to it, it was the whole group that had egged Wei Wuxian to go buy liquor, so the punishment should have been justifiably falling upon all of them. He could only reply, It's nothing outrageous. He can walk. Wei Wuxian, get down. I can't walk, Wei Wuxian said. He extended his astoundingly swollen red palm, explaining to Lan Xichen, Zhe Jun, your little brother is so harsh. Lan Xichen looked over his palm and said, this punishment is indeed a little too severe. I'm afraid it'll take several days to heal, and probably more. Jiang Cheng hadn't realized the beatings were that severe. He exclaimed in alarm, What? Several days? His legs and back were also beaten. How could Lan Wangji be like this? The last part had carried an unconscious tone of displeasure, and Wei Wuxian had already secretly given him a pat before he realized it. Lan Xichen, however, did not mind, and he smiled. But it is fine. Medicine won't be necessary. Wei Ganzi, let me tell you of a remedy that will get you recovered within hours. Nighttime, the cloud recesses. Cold spring. Lan Wangji was soaking in the icy spring waters with his eyes closed, refreshing his spirit, when a voice suddenly whispered in his ear, "Lanzan." Lan Wangji's eyes snapped open. Sure enough, Wei Wuxian was lounging upon a moss-green rock by the cold spring, grinning at him with his head tilted. Lan Wangji burst out, "How did you get in?" Wei Wuxian languidly crawled to his feet and replied as he untied his sash, "Zewujun let me in." "What are you doing?" Lan Wangji demanded. Wei Wuxian kicked off his boots and spoke while undressing, littering the ground with his clothes. "I'm already stripping and you're asking me what I'm doing? They say your clan's cold spring, besides calming the spirit for cultivation purposes, has the ability to heal external injuries. So your Gaga told me to come and soak with you. But it's so sneaky of you to come recuperate alone. Ack, this water is so cold. He entered the spring, and the bone-biting, freezing spring water had him flailing around. Lan Wangji speedily pulled away. "I've come for cultivation, not for recuperation. Stop thrashing." "But it's so cold, it's so cold," Wei Wuxian complained. He wasn't trying to intentionally aggravate this time. It was indeed difficult for outsiders to adapt to the Lan's cold spring so quickly. It felt as though stopping for even a moment would see his blood freezing and his limbs turned to ice, so he had to keep flopping about in the water in order to make himself warm. Lan Wangji had planned on meditating properly here, but Wei Wuxian's flopping about had already gotten him splashed in the face with a full face of water, the droplets slipping down along his long lashes and ebony locks. Unable to endure this any longer, he exclaimed, "Do not move!" He reached out as he spoke, pressing a hand down on Wei Wuxian's shoulder. Wei Wuxian instantly felt warmth surge from where their bodies touched. Feeling a little better, he unconsciously moved in his direction. Lan Wangji tensed. "What?" "Nothing," Wei Wuxian said innocently. "It just feels warmer on your side." Lan Wangji kept an arm firmly between them to maintain distance and stated sternly, "That is untrue." Wei Wuxian had wanted to shuffle closer and get chummy to loosen him up, but when he couldn't and was snubbed, he still wasn't upset. He snuck a glance at Lan Wangji's hands and back. His injuries had not yet faded as Wei Wuxian had expected, so he really hadn't come for recuperation. Wei Wuxian said earnestly, "Lanzan, I really am in awe of you. You really turned yourself in for punishment too when it came down to it, without letting yourself off easy in the slightest. I'm speechless." Lan Wangji shuttered his eyes anew, still and silent. Wei Wuxian added, "It's true. I've never seen anyone so serious and really mean what they say. I could definitely never reach your level. You're amazing." Lan Wangji still ignored him. After getting used to the chill, Wei Wuxian started swimming around in the cold spring. After swimming for a while, he still couldn't resist wading over to Lan Wangji. "Lanzan, can't you tell what I meant by all that chatter?" "No," Lan Wangji replied. "You can't," Wei Wuxian said. "I was complimenting you, trying to get chummy." Lan Wangji gave him a look. "What do you want?" "Lanzan, let's be friends, okay? We're so well acquainted now." "We are not," Lan Wangji said. Wei Wuxian slapped the water. "It's no fun when you're like this. Really, there are a lot of benefits to being my friend." "For example?" Wei Wuxian swam to the side of the pond, leaning with his back to the moss-green rock, laying his arms over it. "I'm always very loyal to my friends, for example. Any newly obtained erotica, I will definitely show you first. Hey, come back. It's nothing if you don't want to look. And have you ever been to Yunmeng? Yunmeng is so much fun, and Yunmeng's food is so good too. I don't know if it's a Guzu problem or a Cloud Recesses problem, but your food is awful. If you came and hung out at the Lotus Pier, you can eat all kinds of good food. I'll take you to pick lotus seeds and water chestnuts. Lanzan, will you come?" "No," Lan Wangji said. "Oh, come on, don't keep issuing rejections with negative words. It feels so cold," Wei Wuxian said. Girls won't like hearing it. You know, the girls in Yangmeng are particularly pretty, a different kind of beautiful than the Guzu girls. He winked at Lan Wangji with his left eye and asked again, pleased, "Are you really not gonna come?" Lan Wangji paused for a moment, but still stated, "No." "Rejecting me like this, without giving me a single bit of face, aren't you worried that when I leave, I'll take your clothes away too?" "Get lost!" Since Lan Qiren's return from Qingxia, he hadn't banished Wei Wuxian to the library to copy the Lan's precepts, only giving him a severe scolding in front of everyone instead. Leaving out all the various allusions to the classics and simplifying it, the gist of the scolding was probably that he had never seen such an unruly, impossible, shameless person. Please get lost, right now, as far as you can. Don't go near other students, and especially don't corrupt his favorite student, Lan Wangji. While he was yelling, Wei Wuxian listened gleefully with a grin, not in the least bit embarrassed or angry. The moment Lan Qiren left, Wei Wuxian sat down and turned to Jiang Qiang. "He's only telling me to get lost now. Don't you think that's a little too late? Telling me that only after I've already corrupted everyone. Too late." The waterborne abyss of Keiyi town presented a major problem for the Lan clan of Guzu. This thing couldn't be eradicated, nor could the Lan family be like the Wen clan and drive it elsewhere. Over the years, the head of the Lan family had spent most of his time in secluded cultivation, so instead, Lan Qiren had expended all of his energy on the matter. Lectures became shorter and shorter, meaning Wei Wuxian was more and more often taking the others out gallivanting on the mountain. On this day, he was once again swarmed by 7 or 8 youths who wanted to go out. As they passed the Lan Library Pavilion, he took a glance up. Through the light-concealing Yulan magnolia branches, he could see Lan Wangji sitting there alone by the window. Ni Huisang wondered, "Is he looking our way? He shouldn't be. We aren't that loud. So why is he looking at us with that look in his eye?" "Probably thinking of how to find fault with us," Wei Wuxian said. "Wrong," Jiang Qiang said. "Not us. It's you. You're the only one he's looking at." "Heh, just wait. Watch how I put him in his place when we get back." "Didn't you complain that he's too dull? That he's boring?" Jiang Qiang said. "So stop teasing him. Pulling a tiger's whiskers. You're just asking for it, every day." "Wrong," Wei Wuxian said. "It's precisely because a grown, living person could be so incredibly boring that he's super interesting." It was nearly noon before they returned to the cloud recesses. Lan Wangji sat poised at his desk, organizing a stack of papers that he had just written, when he heard a light cracking sound from the window lattice. When he looked up, someone had hopped in from outside the window. Wei Wuxian had climbed up the Yulan magnolia branches outside the library pavilion. He exclaimed exultingly, "Lanzan, I'm back! How about it? There hasn't been any script copying for days. Did you miss me?" Lan Wangji was like an old monk entering a deep meditation, seeing all as nothing. He was even somewhat numb as he continued to sort his little pile of book scrolls. Wei Wuxian purposefully twisted the meaning of his silence and continued on. "You don't even have to say anything. I know you must have missed me. Or why would you be watching me from the window earlier?" Lan Wangji immediately cast him a glance, his eyes filled with the soundless condemnation. Wei Wuxian sat down on the window. "Look at you, baited within 2 words. You're too easy to hook, too easily upset." "Leave," Lan Wangji demanded. "If I don't, are you going to throw me out?" Judging by Lan Wangji's expression, Wei Wuxian suspected that if he said one more word, Lan Wangji really would abandon what he had left of his restraint and nail him dead to the windowsill. He quickly said, "Come on, don't be so scary. I came to ask for forgiveness with a gift." Lan Wangji rejected it without hesitation. "I do not want it." "Are you sure?" Wei Wuxian asked. Seeing Lan Wangji's eyes grow guarded, he pulled 2 rabbits from his robes like he was performing a magic trick. He gripped them by the ears like he was holding 2 chubby, round snowballs. Said snowballs were randomly flicking their feet. He delivered them to Lan Wangji. This place of yours is weird, too. No pheasants, but lots of wild bunnies, and they're not afraid of people either. What do you think? They're chubby, right? Do you want 'em?" Lan Wangji watched him, unmoved. "Fine. If you don't want them, then I'll give them to someone else. Food's been pretty bland these days," Wei Wuxian said. Hearing this last part, Lan Wangji said, "Stop." Wei Wuxian shrugged. "It's not like I was leaving." "Who are you going to give them to?" Lan Wangji demanded. "To whoever roasts rabbit meat best," Wei Wuxian answered. "Within the boundaries of the cloud recesses, killing is prohibited. This is the third rule on the wall of discipline," Lan Wangji said. "Fine then. I'll go down the mountain, have the rabbits killed outside the boundary, and bring the meat back up for roasting after. You don't want them anyways, so what do you care?" "Give them to me," Lan Wangji said haltingly. Wei Wuxian started snickering, sitting on the windowsill. "Oh, now you want them? Look at you, always acting like this." The two rabbits were both plump and round, like two fluffy snowballs. One had eyes like a dead fish, languidly lying unmoving on its stomach on the ground. Its pink, rectangular mouth moved lazily as it chewed lettuce. The other hopped up and down non-stop, as if it had swallowed a fighting cricket pill, crawling and rolling all over its companion, wriggling and bounding about incessantly. Wei Wuxian tossed them some more lettuce that he had plucked from who knows where, and suddenly called out, "Lanzan! Lanzan!" That active rabbit had stepped on Lan Wangji's inkstone earlier, leaving a black ink paw print on his desk. Lan Wangji didn't know what to do. He just pulled out a sheet of paper, contemplating with great seriousness how to wipe off the ink, and planned to ignore him. But hearing the urgency in his voice, he thought something was the matter. "What is it?" "Look how they're piling on top of each other. Do you think that They're both male," Lan Wangji exclaimed. "Male? Well, that's weird," Wei Wuxian said. He picked them up by the ears again to check, then confirmed. "They're both indeed male. Oh well. I didn't finish what I was saying. What were you being all stern about? What were you thinking about? Speaking of, I caught these two rabbits and didn't even pay attention to whether they were male or female, and you actually went and saw their—" Lan Wangji finally bodily threw him out of the library pavilion. Wei Wuxian laughed while plummeting through the air. Lan Wangji slammed the window shut with a loud bang, then collapsed next to his desk. He scanned the room, strewn with messes of paper, ink paw prints, and two white rabbits rolling around with lettuce leaves. He closed his eyes and covered his ears. The rustling Yulon magnolia branches veiled the window and shut out the outside. But no matter how hard Lan Wangji fought it, Wei Wuxian's spirited and boisterous laughter could not be easily shut out. The next day, Lan Wangji finally stopped coming to class. Wei Wuxian's seat had changed 3 times. He had originally sat next to Jiang Cheng, but Jiang Cheng was actually attentive in class. In order to perform well, to gain some pride for the Jiang clan of Yunmeng, he had moved to the first row. That spot was too conspicuous and would not allow Wei Wuxian to mess around, so he abandoned Jiang Cheng and moved behind Lan Wangji. While Lan Qiren gave lectures up front, Lan Wangji's upright sitting posture was like that of an ironclad wall, so Wei Wuxian was either sleeping to his heart's content or doodling wildly on paper. Other than the risk that the paper balls he'd throw at others would occasionally be caught by Lan Wangji's sudden hand, this seat was perfect in every aspect. However, Lan Qiren later noticed this scheme and swapped the two of them. Since then, whenever Wei Wuxian's posture slacked, he could sense 2 icy, piercing eyes nailed into his back, and Lan Qiren would shoot furious glances at him as well. It was an extreme pain to be monitored at all times by the old one up front and the little one behind. After the erotica and the rabbit couplet incidents, Lan Qiren was determined that Wei Wuxian was a vat of black ink dye. Terrified that his favorite student would be stained or influenced by being so near him, he quickly stopped Lan Wangji from coming to class anymore. And so Wei Wuxian turned to his old spot, and things remained settled for a good half-month. Unfortunately, the good days never lasted long for someone like Wei Wuxian. Within the cloud recesses, there was a long, windowed wall. For every 7 steps, there was a window with carved fretwork, and every carving was different. There was the playing of a qin on the mountaintop. There was the soaring through the air on swords. There was the killing of Yao and beasts. Lan Ren had explained that every window on the wall was engraved with the story of the Lan ancestors. The oldest among the carvings, as well as the most famous, depicted the 4 scenes of the life of the founding father of the Lan clan, Lan An. This founder had been born in a temple. Innately intelligent, he grew up amidst the murmur of Buddhist sutras and became an eminent monk known far and wide from a young age. At his crowning age, he returned to secular life with the Lan from Tielan, Sanskrit for monastery, as his surname, and became a musician. On his path of cultivation, he met in Guzu the fated one he had sought. The two became cultivation partners and went on to form the foundation of the Lan family. When his partner passed, he returned to the temple and ended his life. The 4 windows were named thus: the monastery, music study, cultivation partners, and return to nothingness. Finally, after so long, there was something interesting being taught. Although Lan Ren made it sound like some dry, tedious annal, Wei Wuxian absorbed the information. After class was dismissed, he laughed. So the founding father of the Lan clan was a monk. No surprise there. To enter the secular world for the sake of one person. Should you leave, I too shall leave, and this life shall not remain in the world. With such a character for a founder, how did he give birth to such unromantic descendants? No one else had imagined that the infamously old-fashioned Lan family would have such a founder either, and they got into a discussion over it. As they talked, the topic veered off to cultivation partners, and they began exchanging their thoughts on their ideal match, commenting on the girls of various reputable sects. Then someone said, "Zizhuanzheng, who do you think is the best girl?" When Wei Wuxian and Zheng Zheng heard this, they both looked at a youth sitting in the front row of the orchid room. This youth was proud and handsome with a cinnabar dot between his brows, and his collars, cuffs, and sashes were all embroidered with the white peony, sparks amongst snow. This was the little young master of the Jin clan of Lanling had sent, Jin Zilhuan. Someone else answered, "Don't bother asking Zilhuanzheng that. He's already got a fiancé, so the answer is surely his fiancé." Having heard the word fiancé, Jin Zilhuan seemed to purse his lips, looking a little unhappy. The disciple who first asked the question wasn't one to take hints and was still boisterously curious. "For real? Which family is she from? She must be shockingly smart and beautiful, right?" Jin Zilhuan arched his brows. "No need to bring this up again." Wei Wuxian suddenly cut in. "What do you mean there's no need to bring it up again?" Everyone looked at him, surprised. Wei Wuxian had always been a happy-go-lucky soul. Even when scolded or punished, he'd never gotten genuinely angry. Yet now, the hostility on his face was apparent. Furthermore, Zheng Zheng hadn't chided Wei Wuxian for seeking trouble like he normally did, but he sat next to him and looked quite upset. Jin Zilhuan said haughtily, "Is it so hard to understand what 'don't bring it up again' means?" Wei Wuxian sneered. "The words aren't, but is there something about my Shiji that dissatisfies you? That's what I'm finding hard to understand here." The others whispered among themselves. After some words were exchanged, they finally understood what was going on. Turned out, Jin Zilhuan's words earlier had unintentionally prodded a huge hornet's nest. Jin Zilhuan's fiancé was indeed Jiang Yinli, of the Jiang clan of Yanmeng. Jiang Yangli was Jiang Fengmein's eldest daughter and Jiang Zheng's eldest sister by blood. She had a moderate temper, nothing special, steady in speech, but nothing memorable. Her looks were above average, but her talents were nothing astounding. When you compared the beauty of girls of various clans, she couldn't help but be overshadowed. She was the exact opposite of her fiancé, Jin Zizhuan. He was Jin Guanshan's only legitimate son and was outstanding in both looks and talent. In terms of Jiang Yanli's own qualifications, she indeed wouldn't normally have been a match for him. In fact, she would have no right to compete with other girls of prominent clans at all. The reason Jiang Yanli had been able to be betrothed to Jin Zizhuan was because her mother was of the Yu clan of Meishan, a clan friendly with the clan from which Jin Zizhuan's mother hailed. These two madams had grown up together and shared a strong friendship. The Jin clan was proud and haughty, a trait that Jin Zizhuan had inherited completely. With extremely high expectations for a partner, he had long since been dissatisfied with this engagement. Not only was he dissatisfied with the candidate, he was even more so that his mother had decided his marriage entirely on her own. Inwardly, he became more and more resentful of the whole situation. Having been presented with the chance today, he would take it, use it, and throw a fit. Jin Zizhuan demanded back, "Why don't you ask what exactly would satisfy me about her?" Jianzheng shot to his feet. Wei Wuxian pushed Jianzheng back and stood in front of him, sneering. "And you think you're that amazing yourself? Where did you get the confidence to be so choosy?" Because of his engagement, Jin Zizhuan didn't hold a high opinion of the Jiang clan of Yunmeng. He also long since looked askant at Wei Wuxian's behavior. Besides, he prided himself on being singularly exceptional among the juniors. Never had anyone degraded him like this before. He blurted, "If she's dissatisfied, tell her to cancel this engagement. Either way, I don't care about your precious Shiji. If you do, why don't you go ask her father for her hand? Doesn't he treat you more dearly than his own son?" The last comment made Jiangsheng's gaze freeze. Wei Wuxian was beside himself with rage, lunging with a raised fist. Although Jin Zizhui had expected an attack, he didn't expect Wei Wuxian to be so fast, and the punch landed before he was even done talking. Instantly, half of his face was numb. Without another word, he immediately fought back. This fight alarmed two major clans. Zhang Fengmain and Jin Guangshan arrived in Guzu the very same day, from Yangmeng and Lanling respectively. After seeing the two kneeling in punishment, the two heads of the families went to Lan Shichen for a round of serious scolding, both wiping sweat from their foreheads afterwards. After exchanging greetings, Jiang Fengmain raised the subject of canceling the engagement. He said to Jin Guangshan, "It was Ali's mother who was adamant in the first place. I do not agree with it. From the looks of things, neither party is happy with the engagement, so let's not force things." Jin Guangshan was astonished and somewhat doubtful. No matter what, to cancel an engagement with another prominent clan was not a good thing at the end of the day. He said, "What do children know? Let them throw their tantrums. Feng mentioned, you and I can honestly just ignore them." Jinxiang, "Although we set up the marriage for them, we cannot carry it out on their behalf," Jiang Fengmain said. "They are the ones who will be spending their lives together after all." This marriage had never been Jin Guanshan's original intention. If he had wanted to arrange a marriage with a prominent family to bolster his power, the Jiang clan of Yunmeng wasn't the only nor the best choice. It was just that he never dared to disobey Madame Jin at all. But since the head of the Jiang family was raising the subject voluntarily, why keep pestering him? The Jin family was the groom's side, and thus didn't have as much concern as the bride's. Besides, Jin Zizhuan has already been displeased with Jin Yanli as his fiancée, and Jin Guanshan knew this. After such consideration, Jin Guanshan boldly agreed to the cancellation. At this time, Wei Wuxian was still unaware of what he had destroyed. He was kneeling on the cobblestone path that Lan Qiren had designated when Zhang Chang appeared out of nowhere. He said sarcastically, "Well, well, you're kneeling all honest-like." Wei Wuxian gloated. "You know I kneel all the time, but a pampered guy like Jin Zizhuan,
He'd never kneeled before in his life. If it doesn't make him cry for his mommy and daddy, then I'm not named Wei. Jiang held his head for a moment, then said dryly, "Father is here." "Xiji didn't come, did she?" Wei Wuxian asked. "Why would she? To watch how you embarrassed her?" Jiang said. "If she came, would she not have already been here keeping you company or delivering medicine?" Wei Wuxian heaved a sigh. "It would have been nice if Xiji had come. Thank goodness you don't have to be dragged into this." "I was going to," Jiang said. "If you hadn't pushed me away, the other half of Jin Zuan's face would be done for too." "Best not," Wei Wuxian said. "The asymmetry makes him look uglier. I heard he particularly treasures that face of his, like some peacock. I wonder how he feels right now, staring at himself in the mirror." He pounded the ground and laughed. Wei Wuxian then added, "Actually, I should have let you fight while I stood and spectated. That way, Jiang Shu might not have come. But it can't be helped. I couldn't resist." Jiang humped and said softly, "You wish." Wei Wuxian had said what he said offhandedly, but inward, Jiang felt complicated. He knew deep down that it wasn't a lie. Jiang Fengming had never once rushed to another clan within a day over any of Jiang's own affairs, whether they were good or bad, major or minor. Never. Wei Wuxian saw him looking glum and thought that he was still feeling upset over something that Jin Zujuan had said. He said, "Go on, you don't have to keep me company. If Lan Wangji comes again, you'll be caught. If you're free, go gawk at how dumb Jin Zuan looks while kneeling." Jiang was slightly surprised. "Lan Wangji? Why would he come? He still dares to see you?" "Yeah," Wei Wuxian said. "I think it's mighty curious of him to dare to come see me again. It's probably just because his Shufu told him to make sure that I'm kneeling properly, though." Jiang instinctively felt a sense of foreboding. "Then were you kneeling properly at the time?" "I was at the time," Wei Wuxian replied. "But once he walked away for a bit, I picked up a stick and started digging a hole nearby. It's the mound right next to your feet. There's an anthill there. It took me a while to find it. Then, when he looked back and saw me with the slumped shoulders, he must have thought that I was crying or something, because he came over to ask after me. You should have seen his face when he saw that anthill." "I think you'd best get the hell back to Yunmeng," Jiang said. "I think he never wants to see you again." And so, that very night, Wei Wuxian packed up and went the hell back to Yunmeng with Jiang Fengming. End of chapter 4.